Chapter 148. Accompanied by a loud and joyful laughter, Wei Xiaoxiao strode quickly and came before the spatial breaching spirit gold. She grabbed it up and laughed wildly. Wonderful. This is it. With 10,000 pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold like this, it will be more than enough for me to explain myself to Patriarch. Quick, quick, before the people from Great Yan Dynasty find this place, dig out at least 10,000 pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold for me. After shoving the spatial breaching spirit gold into her storage ring, Wei Xiaoxiao scolded furiously, "What are you waiting for? Do it now." Without enough spatial breaching spirit gold, if Patriarch finds out the truth, I will have to bear the responsibility and the power of my clan will be stripped away. As my personal guards, how good will it be for you? After losing your power, how much better can you be compared to those servants who only serve tea and water? Wei Xiaoxiao glanced at the several dozens of cultivators around her, sneered and said, "Fortunately, we have that idiot Wei Longfeng as our scapegoat. Only then do we have the hope of getting away with this crime. Remember this well, just tell them that I brought you here to dig out the spatial breaching spirit gold," and Wei Longfeng ran amok in Ji City, causing Yan Dan to come and probe us personally. That was the reason why we were exposed. You know what you should say, and what you shouldn't. Those cultivators looked at each other, exchanged a few glances, and at the same time, exerted all their strength to attack the surrounding iron walls. At that moment, the entire mine was filled with sword beams that were shooting in all directions. Thunderclaps kept ringing out, and the ground was shaking slightly. The iron walls were being blasted apart, and the broken iron ores were piled up on the ground. After over 15 minutes of hard work, only one lucky embryonic breath realm cultivator of Xiantian realm managed to dig out a fist-sized piece of spatial breaching spirit gold from the iron wall. All the others found nothing. Approximately 1 hour later, apart from a few human immortals of Jin Dan realm who were still trying their best to form sword incantations, controlling their flying swords to pierce through the iron wall, the rest of the cultivators below Jin Dan realm had long been exhausted to the point of dizziness and weakness in their bodies. They sat on the ground panting, meditating and regulating their breath, consuming some spirit pills to replenish their energy. Wei Xiaoxiao was very dissatisfied with the efficiency of these cultivators. After a round of curses, she personally controlled her flying sword and thrust it towards the iron wall. Clang! Wei Xiaoxiao's red sword beam hit the iron wall and produced a large amount of sparks, as it chopped off a piece of iron or the size of a toddler's fist. The huge rebounding force sent her sword light flying more than 100 feet away, brushing past her body and almost chopping off one of her arms. Wei Xiaoxiao was so frightened that her face turned green. With a blank expression, she looked at those subordinates who were sitting on the ground and regulating their breaths, and wisely shut her mouth. Wu Qi shook his head and used his escape technique to descend into the ground. 10,000 pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold. Judging from the working efficiency of Wei Xiaoxiao and her men, it would take them at least 8 to 10 days to finish the excavation. However, they should have the time to waste here with the iron wall. Yan Dan should be planning to deal with the vassal states involved in the rebellion, so no one would pay attention to this place for the time being. Surrounded by dense earth power, Wu Qi formed a spell with both of his hands. Circles of gentle yellow light emitted from his body as he quickly moved underground. He carefully identified the direction where the dimensional ripple came from, and carefully, step by step, he moved towards the source of the ripple. Gradually, more and more crystal cores of high-quality metals appeared around him, and there were even some spatial breaching spirit gold of different sizes. There was no need to mention the spatial breaching spirit gold. Although these crystal cores were formed purely from gold element energies, although they had the appearance of gold, silver, copper, iron, and many other metals, they were actually the essence condensed from pure gold element energies. It was just that they had the physical characteristics of gold, silver, copper, iron, and other metals. These crystal cores were the best additive for crafting items. Even if it was an upper-grade magical treasure, as long as a tiny bit of this crystal core was added during the crafting process, it would be able to greatly improve the power of the magical treasure and the strength of the magical treasure itself. This was also a rare treasure, and if one were to purchase them in the market of 4 seas, it would cost a huge sum of money. At the same time, Wuqi shoved all the materials into his storage ring. As a cultivator had a long lifespan, it was not a bad thing to store more materials. Wuqi kept descending, and when the materials and spatial breaching spirit gold he collected had filled up all 3 storage spaces in his storage ring and bracelet, he suddenly felt the ground beneath his feet was empty. He had finally arrived at a strange space. At this point of time, the energy in Wuqi's body had been nearly depleted. If he still could not arrive at this place, he would have to consider returning to the surface to replenish his energy. The gold element energies found in the soil and mountain rocks here were extremely dense, and had turned the ground into a large block, like a steel ingot. Fortunately, Wuqi was using an innate escape art. If it were those cultivators around Wei Xiaoxiao who were using all sorts of earth escape art, perhaps right after they entered the ground, they would have been crushed into pieces by the gold element energies. Even so, the energy Wuqi had consumed in this place was at least 100 times more than when he was in an ordinary place. He nearly ran out of energy to support him to come to this place. Taking a few deep breaths, Wuqi stared at the strange space in front of him, and could not help but be struck dumb. It was a huge stone chamber, measuring about 1 mile in both width and length, and over 300 feet in height. It had a domed dome, which was obviously excavated by man. Because of the extremely dense gold element energies, the walls of this chamber had turned as white as snow, glinting with a dazzling golden gleam. Spatial breaching spirit gold and various metal crystal cores, the size of a human head, were embedded on the walls. At first glance, it was hard to tell how many of them there were. Right in the middle of the domed dome, there was a white lotus with 49 petals, naturally condensed from the gold element energies. A vague shadow of a sword could be vaguely seen in the stamen of the lotus, and a 10-feet-long white beam was seen flickering from time to time, emanating an incredibly fierce and sharp aura. Cautiously, Wuqi's divine sense approached the sword shadow. As a result, a sharp aura suddenly burst out from the sword shadow, causing Wuqi's divine sense to suffer a severe injury. His body trembled, and a mouthful of blood sprayed out to a distance of 30 feet. This is the spirit cave of gold element, a soul condensed from an innate thread of gold element energies. If it were to fully take shape, it would be a supreme-grade spirit item. What a pity, judging from its young age, I'm afraid it would take at least several tens of thousands of years for it to fully take shape. Wuqi looked at the white beam which had given him a great deal of suffering, and murmured under his breath, "But, it is not too bad. When it is about to take a corporeal form, no one will be able to control it, unless it is a heaven immortal. Although it has a very powerful power now, its soul is completely blank. It's just the right time to use it as an item spirit." After a brief moment of pondering, Wuqi pulled out the sword of Greedy Wolf, clenched his teeth and made a cut on his wrist, forcing out a large amount of blood essence and spraying it onto the surface of the sword. Locking the blood with his divine sense, he painted a great number of sealing talismans found in Scroll of Stealing on the body of the flying sword. After that, he carefully took a long distance back. After that, he unleashed the flying sword and shot it towards the lotus flower condensed from gold element energies in the center of the dome. The sword beam pierced through the air. Like a fierce tiger whose territory was invaded, the white beam let out a loud cry as it shot out from the stamen of the lotus flower and smashed brutally onto the sword of Greedy Wolf. A large sheet of red light burst out, as several dozens of twisting blood-red runes shot out from the sword, tightly trapping the white beam and forcibly dragging it into the sword. Layers of white ripples that could be seen with naked eyes kept bursting out from the sword. The sword, which was a lower-tier magical treasure, cracked inch by inch, then quickly fused back together. However, the speed of cracking was much faster than the speed of fusing. It seemed that the sword could no longer withstand the power of the white beam, and was about to be torn into pieces. Sighing and crying, Wuqi clenched his teeth and bit the tip of his tongue, forcing out 3 drops of his prime blood essence, which was extremely precious to any cultivator, and spat them onto the sword of Greedy Wolf. The blood-red runes on the body of the sword shone brightly, transforming into a large net and tightly trapping the twisting white beam inside the sword. Not fearing that his energy would be damaged, Wu Qi took out all sorts of spirit pills given to him by Princess Zhang and kept pouring them into his mouth. Sensing the frightening medicinal strength exploding in his stomach like a bomb, Wu Qi forcibly exercised the energy in his meridians, causing the 7 shadows of deities and devils formed from the 7 holy deities and devils' spirit tempering technique in his spiritual ocean to jump and roar crazily. Carefully, they brought up towering waves of water, earthy energies, flame, and shadows of trees as they approached the divine flame of order that was burning brightly in the center of his spiritual ocean. According to the scroll of stealing, all the natural spirit items were formed by the essence of the heaven and earth, and those who did not possess a great fortune should never covet them by force. However, the scroll of stealing was a heaven-defying cultivation technique. If one did not possess a great fortune, he would seize a thread of fortune by force. If there was no fortune, he would seize a thread of fortune. In short, in the eyes of a cultivator of the scroll of stealing, all the natural spirit items would belong to him or her. If there was a condition, he or she would take it. If there was no condition, he or she would have to forcibly create a condition. What Wu Qi was using now was a mystic technique from the scroll of stealing that allowed him to forcibly stimulate his blood essence and nascent divinity, making use of all the conditions available to him to forcibly take away the natural spirit items. After that, he used the medicinal strength to stimulate his energy, making it at least 100 times stronger in an instant. After that, he used the 7 holy deities and devils to stimulate his divine sense, making it at least 100 times stronger as well. At the same time, he exercised the waves of water, earthy energies, flame, and wood energies in his spiritual ocean, trying his best to control a thread of the divine flame of order. At the same time, his palms kept changing incantation gestures, performing a set of hand incantation from the scroll of stealing called Seal of Minor Universal Star Shifting, which only Earth immortals could use. By forcibly stimulating his energy and divine sense, and even using a high-level hand incantation that only Earth immortals could use, although Wu Qi had managed to control an enormous amount of natural energy for his own use, his corporeal body could not withstand the tremendous pressure, and began to crack and injure itself. Fortunately, the cultivation technique of scroll of stealing emphasized on the foundation. When he was cultivating the source chapter, source of wood, source of fire, and source of earth, he had tempered his corporeal body to the same level as an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Therefore, he barely withstood the backlash. Although countless cracks appeared on his fleshly body, he still managed to maintain an intact body. A thread of purple and green divine flame sprayed out from his fingertip. Following the transformation of the seal of minor universal star shifting, the tiny flame danced and danced on Wu Qi's palm. Gradually, it condensed into several thousand tiny runes that were branded with 12 celestial bodies and 28 constellations. Together with tiny fiery sparks, they suddenly flew out from his palm and branded onto the sword of greedy wolf. Wu Qi waved his hand casually. All the crystal cores he collected along the way, as well as some materials he collected in the market of 4 seas in G City, which were used to refine magical items, rushed out like a tidal wave, fusing into the sword of greedy wolf that was ablaze with the purple and green divine flame. The white beam condensed from the gold element energies let out a moan, as it was intimidated by the thread of the great Tao of heaven and earth contained in the divine flame of order. Immediately, its ferocious power was greatly reduced. After that, countless materials of gold element energies and crafting items swarmed over. Driven by the seal of minor universal star shifting, the runes burning with the divine flame of order completely shattered the sword of greedy wolf. With the white beam as the core, it was reformed into a brand new flying sword. The energy in Wu Qi's body was depleting at an incredible speed, and his body began to tremble violently. He did not care whether his body could withstand it or not. He grabbed a couple dozen bottles of spirit pills that could replenish his energy and swallowed them. With that, he managed to maintain the energy in his body at a level that was infinitely close to nascent soul realm. His divine sense was throbbing at an incredible speed, while all 10 of his fingers moved as if they were flying. Very quickly, he branded 108 famous flying sword formation diagrams found in Scroll of Stealing onto the newly born sword of greedy wolf. A thunderclap rang out, as a pitch-black flying sword, its shape indistinguishable, shot up into the sky, and was about to break through the void and fly away. Wu Qi gave a loud cry. He opened his mouth and coughed out a stream of bright red blood, smashing forcefully onto the flying sword. Chapter 149. A large amount of blood splashed onto the sword of Greedy Wolf, and was quickly absorbed by the sword. Abruptly, the divine flame of order burned vigorously on the sword, causing wisps of sharp white energy to burst out from the sword, cutting countless fine and deep marks on the surrounding walls and the ground. In one breath, Wu Qi performed the last 18 hand incantations of the seal of minor universal star shifting. Countless specks of starlight shot out from Wu Qi's fingertips, branding themselves on the sword of Greedy Wolf in just a blink of an eye. At the moment when the hand incantations were completed, a bloodline connection was suddenly established between Wu Qi and the sword of Greedy Wolf. Like a newborn baby, the once dim and heavy sword of Greedy Wolf had a feeling of longing and fear towards Wu Qi's divine sense. Hastily, Wu Qi mustered up the last bit of his energy, using his divine sense to transmit a wisp of kindness into the sword of Greedy Wolf. Then, as if he was trying to abduct a little girl, he slowly comforted the newly born item spirit. This item spirit was an innate soul condensed from the gold element energies in this gold element spirit cave for an unknown number of years. As a result, it possessed a mighty power, and an astonishing divine sense. However, since the ancient times, this place was uninhabited, and no one had ever come into contact with it. As a result, the item spirit of Greedy Wolf had been growing by relying on its instinct for so many years. Theoretically speaking, it would only develop its true intelligence when its body had condensed into a corporeal form. However, after being nourished by Wu Qi's blood essence and communicated with him using a mystic technique, the item spirit which had yet to fully form was awakened. Like Wu Qi's child, it had formed a spiritual connection with him. However, as the item spirit was brutally burned by the divine flame of order and nearly had its soul disintegrated, it once again felt an instinctive fear towards Wu Qi. After being comforted by Wu Qi's divine sense, the item spirit quickly forgot the pain it suffered just now. Like a newborn baby, it flew happily to Wu Qi's side, then began to hover lightly around Wu Qi. What was seen was a black beam of light, about 30 feet long, spinning rapidly around Wu Qi like a ripple of water, or more like a beam of light, or like a ghost that came with the chilly wind in the middle of the night. It brought forth an immense cold air, while an invisible and sharp aura tore one after another tiny sword marks on the ground. As the gold element energies in this place were constantly impacted by the spatial ripples all year round, of course, of spatial breaching spirit gold was formed. Of course, this item spirit was nourished by the spatial ripples for many years, and had also acquired a certain spatial characteristic. The biggest feature of item spirit with spatial characteristic was that it could fly without any trace. With this item spirit controlling it, the speed was at least 10 times faster than other flying swords. Wu, of sword, Wu, of spirit of sword, and Qi, and, sword, of sword, spirit energy of spirit of spirit. Of Qi, and suddenly, sword with of spirit, of Qi, and of sword, of spirit, and of spirit. Currently, the quality of sword of Greedy Wolf had risen to the level of upper-tier magical treasure, and it had a huge room for improvement in the future. There was a great possibility that it could become a spirit item, or even an even higher grade item. After all, this item spirit had an extraordinary origin. As a spirit item condensed from the heaven and earth, its power and potential were not to be underestimated. A spirit item like this could never be left in a storage ring to grow moldy. Instead, it had to be hidden in one's body, where it could be constantly tempered by blood essence and energy. Only then would it be able to connect with its master's mind in the future, and unleash a stronger and greater power. After retrieving the sword of Greedy Wolf, Wu Qi swallowed a few life-saving spirit pills, then lay on the ground and panted for a long time. Only then did he manage to recover a little bit of his strength. The powerful effect of the 7 foundation establishment technique was gradually brought into play. Standing on the ground with both feet, he began to absorb the earth element energies to nourish his entire body. At the same time, the wood element energies and water element energies, which were filled with life force and nourishing energy, were rippling out from the meridians, slowly nourishing his body. In just over a quarter of an hour, he had regained 70 to 80% of his ability to move. Slowly, Wuqi walked up to the enormous 49 petals lotus flower condensed from the gold element energies. Using his divine will, he quickly communicated with the glinting silver lotus flower. This lotus flower was the mother of the item spirit, so naturally, it was a rare and extraordinary treasure. Casually, Wuqi beckoned at the lotus flower. Immediately, the nearly 100 feet wide silver lotus flower shrunk rapidly, turning into a fist-sized lotus bud. Then, it gently fell down from the sky and landed right in Wuqi's hand. Frowning, Wuqi looked at the lotus flower and smiled. It was a spirit item. The so-called spirit item was a magical item with a power stronger than any magical treasure, and it was guarded by an item spirit. Perhaps the lethality of a spirit item was not as great as some magical treasures with incredible power, but it had its own spirit. When its master was in danger, it could take the initiative to protect its master. There were even some spirit items that could take the initiative to leave the sheath and travel thousands of miles away to kill the enemy. As for magical treasures, no matter how powerful they did not have such a spirit effect. Without the control of its master, no matter how powerful it was, even if it was a magical treasure that could shatter a star with a single strike, it was just a lifeless object. As for this silver lotus flower, it was a spirit item, and a small part of it had been artificially crafted. Wuqi sensed the clear divine will in the depths of the lotus flower. The function of this lotus flower was to breathe the item spirit sealed in the sword of greedy wolf. Day and night, its 49 petals extracted and purified the gold element energies, constantly feeding them into the item spirit. It could be said that this silver lotus flower was the birth mother of the sword of greedy wolf. Perhaps it was because of the fear of disturbing the growth of the sword of greedy wolf, although a small part of the silver lotus flower had been artificially crafted, allowing it to become a 49 petals lotus flower that was the most convenient for absorbing natural energies. The person who crafted it did not leave any mark on it. He just let the lotus flower work on its own, constantly operating the spirit array in its body to nourish the sword of greedy wolf. It was unknown how many years it had been absorbing the gold element energies. Although this tiny silver lotus flower looked thin and light, in fact, it weighed several hundreds of thousands of kilograms. On top of that, it was formed from the extremely pure acquired energies of 5 metals, and had become a spirit item with tremendous power. Wuqi pondered for a brief moment, then he left his divine will mark on this spirit item which looked like a piece of white paper, and brought it into his body as well. Upon entering Wuqi's body, the silver lotus quickly fused into his spiritual ocean, hovering above the energies of the 4 elements. The water waves, flame, wood energies, and earth energies in Wuqi's spiritual ocean turned into 4 mighty tides, slowly seeping into the silver lotus flower. On the surface of the silver lotus flower, a thread of blue color of water wave, green color of spirit wood, red color of flame, and yellow color of earth slowly emerged. Together with the silver-white color of the lotus flower itself, the 5 colors made the lotus flower very dazzling and beautiful. Without hesitation, the thread of divine flame of order twisted its body and leaped onto the pistil of the lotus flower. Energies of 5 colors slowly sprayed out from the pistil, slowly fusing into the divine flame of order. The originally 1 foot and 2 inches long, thumb-thick divine flame of order quivered slightly, and its size seemed to have increased slightly. Wuqi was secretly delighted. This lotus flower was indeed magical. Without a doubt, the person who crafted it was a formidable man who had attained the righteous fruit of the immortal Tao. Now that it was actively absorbing energies of 5 elements, it seemed like it would be able to perfectly fuse with his 7 foundation establishment technique in the future. Perhaps, he could turn this silver lotus flower into a very powerful treasure that could be used for both defensive and offensive purposes. With its intrinsic quality, which had been tempered by the gold element energies for many years, and together with the power of the innate energies of 5 elements, the future of this treasure was even greater than the sword of greedy wolf. Taking a deep breath, Wuqi cast away all the distracting thoughts, took a few steps forward carefully, and came to the core of the cave, where the pistil of the lotus flower was originally facing. The ground here had sunk down, forming a perfectly round, 3 feet deep pool. The pool had a diameter of several tens of feet, and the spirit liquid in it was crystal clear, not moving at all. At the bottom of the pool were countless runes and formation diagrams, and right in the middle of the pool was a thumb-sized black pearl, emanating a faint spatial ripple. The spatial ripple that filled the entire iron mine was coming from this pearl. Vigilantly, Wu Qi circled around the pool a few times, then slowly dismantled and deciphered the details of the formation diagrams in the pool. It was a dimensional void formation, a formation that could tear the void apart, and was used to deploy deadly traps in the abodes of those ancient almighty experts. The formation was incredibly powerful, and once it was activated, the dimensional void blades could easily kill any existence below the realm of gold immortal. Currently, the formation was only confined by the black pearl, and the countless dimensional void blades that were about to burst out were forcibly destroyed by the pearl, turning into endless spatial ripples that swept across the entire place. That was the reason why this iron mine produced the spatial breaching spirit gold, and the reason why Lu Buwei and Wei Xiaoxiao came up with a scheme to seize these metal mines in Duke Yanli's fief. Initially, they only wanted this iron mine, but in order to fool the public, they decided to obtain the management rights of all the metal mines in Duke Yanli's fief. First, Yan Helua was sent here. When he was chased away by Wu Qi, Wei Xiaoxiao was sent here personally. When Wei Xiaoxiao was threatened by Nie Baihong with violence and swore an oath, Lu Buwei was sent here personally. Finally, with the help of the kindness he had done for Lu Qingfeng in the past, he managed to get his hands on this iron mine. Perhaps, the death of Yan Buji was related to this iron mine? Nevertheless, Wu Qi was not in the mood to find out the reason. He gave the black pearl a greedy look, then shook his head. The outer dimension Great Void formation was not something he could control now. Even a first-tier heaven immortal did not have the ability to construct a formation like this. Wu Qi knew everything about this formation, but his overall strength was too weak. Even though he knew everything about this formation, he could not do anything to it. Therefore, this pearl of unknown origin could only be left here. The spatial ripples were spreading in all directions, but 80% of them were gathered in this crystal-clear pool. Amidst the spirit liquid condensed from the gold element energies, several hundred silver pearls the size of a fist were seen rolling and rolling at the bottom of the pool along with the spatial ripples. These pearls were formed purely from the innate grand white gold element energies, and they were almost transparent silver in color. The quality of these pearls was incredibly high, as if they were born as a spirit item. At the core of these pearls, there was an indistinct speck of light that looked pitch black, yet dazzling and blinking rapidly. Upon a closer look, one would realize that these 360 fist-sized pearls were not rolling like normal pearls when they were rolling at the bottom of the pond. Instead, they were teleporting for an extremely short distance. Their bodies were constantly jumping between this space and another space. Their trajectory was not a complete line, but formed by countless tiny dots. As expected. Wu Qi counted with his fingers, and then he nodded and said with a smile, "I wonder which senior set up this grand formation here for the sake of collecting the grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate qi. That's the best material to refine top-rate immortal artifacts. What a pity, the climate was not there yet. It would probably take another 3 to 5 periods before it could truly condense the grand white spatial breaching pearl of innate qi. But for me, it's enough. 360 grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate qi, which had yet to take shape, could be used to forge a set of spirit tools that could both attack and defend." Wu Qi could barely control it with his Jin Dan stage cultivation. If this place was a fully formed grand white spatial breaching pearl of innate qi, Wu Qi would definitely turn around and leave without even giving it a glance. It was not something that could be touched by any existence below the gold immortal realm. The grand white spatial breaching pearl of innate qi, which was constantly vibrating at a high frequency, was like an electric saw that vibrated at a high frequency. Any existence below the gold immortal realm, whether it was their flesh or divine sense, would be torn to shreds by the high frequency vibration. And the current situation was just right. After carefully collecting the 360 pearls, Wuqi looked at the several hundred wisps of faint white mist drifting back and forth in the center of the pond. Suddenly, he threw his head back and laughed. Innate gold element energies were found. He could start cultivating the source of gold chapter of the 7 foundation establishment technique. Chapter 150. The spirit liquid condensed from the gold element energies did not have much use, as it was just a raw material stored by the formation, used to nourish the grand white spatial breaching pearl of innate energies. After taking away the pearl, Wuqi did not even give the spirit liquid another look. Instead, the several hundred threads of innate gold element energies at the bottom of the pool made him burst with joy. He laughed so hard that tears almost flowed out from his eyes. Thank the heaven, thank the senior immortals who had left so many precious treasures in this world. Initially, Wuqi thought he had no hope of obtaining the innate spirit items, but in just a few short months, he had managed to gather all of them. Even the shadowy figure who had given him the scroll of stealing would have to marvel at Wuqi's great luck. Devoutly, he cupped his fist and prayed a few times to the sky, thanking the unknown senior immortal who had given him the name of Thunder Edge Style. Wuqi's eyes shone with a four-colored gleam as he pointed his finger at the bottom of the pool. Immediately, a thread of innate gold element energies, as thin as a hair and nearly 10 feet long, squeezed into his fingertip and quickly merged into his gold meridian. Wuqi's body trembled violently. Both of his lungs expanded abruptly, and his breathing sounded like thunder. The fundamental energy cultivation technique of heaven-breaking sword sect, the qi circulating technique of 5 elements, was exerted with full force. A large amount of pale white energies kept bursting out from both of his lungs. With a faint smile on his face, Wuqi paid no attention to the qi circulating technique of 5 elements, focusing all his attention on exercising the source of gold chapter. About 6 hours later, after Wuqi had digested the thread of innate gold element energies, a large amount of innate gold element energies had been produced in his gold meridian. After sensing the condition of his body with satisfaction, Wuqi took out the energy stones of 5 elements given by Princess Zhonglu and piled them up next to him according to the positions of the 5 elements, then absorbed all the innate gold element energies in the pool into his body. The complete source of 5 elements chapter of 7 foundation establishment technique began to be exercised, as the enormous energies of 5 elements kept fusing into Wuqi's body from the energy stones of 5 elements. In his water meridian, the 2 Jin Dan were spinning rapidly, constantly spewing out a large amount of innate water gang, which flowed along the water meridian, through the wood meridian, and then into the fire meridian, followed by the earth meridian, and finally the metal meridian. Soon, a complete cycle of 5 elements was formed in the 7 stealing heaven meridian in his arms. A 5-colored glow enveloped Wuqi's body. After a full 48 hours, he had transformed all the innate gold element energy into gold element energy shield. Furthermore, with the replenishment of the energy from the gold element energy stones in the outside world, he had pushed the source of gold chapter to the same level as the other 4 chapters. Suddenly, the 2 water element Jin Dan in his water meridian burst out with a 5-colored glow. In the next moment, the Jin Dan disintegrated and divided into 10 parts that had no elemental properties, looking pale and empty like shadows. Wuqi's body trembled, and a large amount of cold sweat kept breaking out from his body. He exerted all his mental power and slowly drove these 10 Jin Dan, which looked like a faint mist, as if it could be blown away with just a puff of air. Carefully, they moved along his meridians and settled down in the 5 meridians of gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. The energies of 5 elements were rolling and rolling, back and forth, transforming and generating each other. Gradually, these 10 extremely weak Jin Dan began to glow with the unique glow of the 5 elements, and their bodies were much more stable than before. This was the most magical technique in Scroll of Stealing, the Golden Light Splitting technique, which could improve one's cultivation level together with the 5 elements. As long as one could form a Jin Dan with one elemental property, he could use this mystic technique to erase the Jin Dan's property, then divide the Jin Dan into 5 parts and place them in the 5 meridians of 5 elements. As long as he kept injecting the innate energies of 5 elements into the Jin Dan, then fusing it with his divine sense and soul, and with a certain amount of hard work, these Jin Dan would soon transform into a true Jin Dan, a false core. As long as he continued to work hard, tempering the water and fire elements, it wouldn't take too long for the false core to reform into a true Jin Dan. By using this mystic technique, it could at least save Wu Qi 100 years of hard cultivation. However, it would consume a huge amount of blood essence and energy. But with Scroll of Stealing, he could absorb the blood essence and energy of others to replenish his own body. So, this little bit of blood essence and energy was nothing. Not only did the core splitting technique consume a lot of blood essence and energy, it also divided the divine sense of the Jin Dan, which had already taken shape. It was like a few slashes on Wu Qi's soul, causing him to twitch from head to toe in pain. Luckily, he did not faint. However, with the 7 holy deities and devils protecting his soul, it was impossible for Wu Qi to faint even if he wanted to. All he could do was to clench his teeth and endure the endless pain. When he finally completed the unimaginable process of splitting the Jin Dan, he was drenched in sweat, and a large puddle of sweat had formed on the ground. Lying on the ground, he did not even have the strength to breathe. After lying on the ground for a full 3 days and 3 nights in a daze, Wu Qi's dull eyes finally regained some light. Slowly, inch by inch, he struggled to stand up from the ground. Hastily, he took out a few pill bottles and swallowed a few life-saving pills that were concocted with the secret recipe of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial clan. Finally, he managed to regain a tiny bit of his strength. Although his body was weak, innate energies of 5 elements were flowing back and forth in the meridians in both his arms. The innate energies of 5 elements were in perfect balance, with no more and no less. Energies of 5 elements were swaying and spitting in the 10 false cores. A misty white mist was seen bursting out from Wu Qi's body. Following the cultivation technique of the origin of 5 elements, he quietly regulated his breath. With that, the strength in his body was restored quickly, and he no longer looked like he could be knocked down by a gust of wind. With the balance of 5 elements and the stability of reincarnation, the cultivation of the 7 foundation establishment technique had entered a new realm. At this stage, no matter what kind of energy stones Wu Qi found, he could absorb them at will. After all, the energies would be divided into 5 equal portions, with innate energies of 5 elements taking 1 portion each. Currently, his false core realm was dozens of times stronger than the embryonic breath tier of Xiantian realm, but when compared to a real Jin Dan human immortal, it was still a few times weaker. However, with the 10 false cores working together, the energy he could muster was at least 2 times stronger than that of an early-stage Jin Dan human immortal. And in terms of the toughness of his fleshly body and meridians, he had even reached the standard of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm, which was far beyond the strength that a human immortal of Jin Dan should have. Looking at the large number of energy stones around him that had all their energies sucked dry, Wu Qi casually threw them into the pool of spirit liquid condensed from the gold element energy. After several dozens of years, there should be a pile of gold element energy stones in this pool. After giving the black pearl in the depths of the pool a careful look, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh. Certainly, this pearl was an innate level spirit item, but this outer dimension great void formation was too frightening. With the essence of formations he learned from Scroll of Stealing, without the overall strength of a first-tier heaven immortal, there was no way he could resolve the threat posed by this formation and obtain the pearl. First-tier heaven immortal. Wu Qi shook his head. That was still a long time away, and he had better not have that sweet dream. After that, he swallowed a few more pills to replenish his physical strength. A clump of yellow light wrapped around his body, and a cloud of sand rose up from the ground. Wu Qi drilled into the ground and quickly plunged into the mountain rocks. Using his fastest speed, he flew upwards, and very soon, he arrived at the mine where Wei Xiaoxiao and her company were excavating the iron wall. The mine, which was originally about 1,000 feet in circumference, was now riddled with potholes. A few human immortals of Jin Dan had controlled their sword beams and excavated a 1,000 feet deep tunnel on the iron wall. Wei Xiaoxiao, with her clothes in a disheveled mess, was seen sitting on a piece of iron or the size of a water tank, glaring fiercely at the surrounding cultivators. With a stern voice, she scolded, "Hurry up and work harder. Without enough spatial breaching spirit gold, we've lost the foundation of G City, and so many vassal kingdoms that are on friendly terms with us. How am I going to explain this to Patriarch when I return? 10,000 pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold, we need at least 10,000 pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold. Quick, quick. Clang. Suddenly, a pale green sword beam was broken into two. Countless specks of fluorescent light sprayed out from the broken part of the sword beam. A cultivator of respiration tear coughed out a mouthful of blood and sat weakly on the ground. He stared blankly at Wei Xiaoxiao and said, "Young miss, your subordinate is useless. I no longer have the strength to do anything." Wei Xiaoxiao gazed at the cultivator with a cruel and merciless expression, then casually thrust out a sword beam and cut the cultivator into two halves from the waist. With a stern voice, she cried out, "Hurry up! Hurry up! What are you waiting for? Without 10,000 pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold, none of us will have a good ending." The cave suddenly trembled, as the huge black skeleton controlled by Wei Xiaoxiao had punched out a 10 feet wide hole on the iron wall. From the hole rolled out a dozen pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold of different sizes. Wei Xiaoxiao let out a loud laugh and cheered. Without hesitation, she sprung up and dashed towards the black skeleton, shoving all the spatial breaching spirit gold into her storage ring. A bunch of useless fools. Wei Xiaoxiao roared with laughter and said, "You are worse than a fiend from the realm of fiends without any consciousness." A few human immortals of Jin Dan, who were panting and sweating profusely while controlling their flying swords to hack the iron wall, suddenly halted their sword beams. They panted heavily at the same time, sat down on the ground, and began to regulate their breath and meditate. Two human immortals took out a pill bottle and shook it. The pill bottle was now completely empty, and there were no more pills that could replenish energy and spirit. They casually threw the empty pill bottle aside. Wei Xiaoxiao, who had just picked up the spatial breaching spirit gold, suddenly flew into a rage. She pointed her finger at those human immortals of Jin Dan and snapped, "What are you doing? Are you trying to rebel? What are you doing? Why don't you hurry up and do it? You bunch of useless fools. It has been so many days, yet you still haven't collected 10,000 pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold. How am I going to explain this to Patriarch when I return?" A cultivator of embryonic breath tier of Xiantian realm suddenly sprung to his feet. He stared at Wei Xiaoxiao and snapped, word by word, "Young miss, we all remember the order given to us by Patriarch before he left. He asked us to guard our base and concentrate on mining the spatial breaching spirit gold, and forbid us from offending Duke Yan Lu and the people around him. Why did young miss insist on killing Wu Qi? Instead, he took advantage of the situation and set up an ambush, which led to our defeat today." Another Xiantian cultivator rose to his feet as well. He stared at Wei Xiaoxiao and said furiously, "Young miss, all the responsibility is caused by your own decision. Why do you want us to bear the blame together with young miss? We will tell Patriarch the truth. On the night when Patriarch left, Wei Longfeng was assassinated by someone. We suspect that young miss is the one who sent someone to assassinate him." A cold gleam appeared in Wei Xiaoxiao's eyes. She sneered and said, "What reason do I have to assassinate him?" The first Xiantian cultivator said with a cold voice, "For the sake of holding the absolute power, you controlled the entire Wei merchant of Great Yan dynasty alone." Wei Xiaoxiao stared at the two Xiantian cultivators and snorted coldly, "Why are you bringing up this question now?" The second Xiantian cultivator said angrily, "The rocks here are soaked by the gold element energies all year round, making them at least 100 times stronger than steel. Our flying swords are useless, and our spells are ineffective. We have to exhaust all our strength, and only then can we mine 1 or 2 pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold. It is fine if young miss doesn't show compassion to your servants, but why do you have to speak so viciously to us?" Wei Xiaoxiao sneered. She did not say another word, but pointed her finger at the two Xiantian cultivators and said sternly, "Kill them." The dark skeleton behind Wei Xiaoxiao let out a shrill and strange howl. It swung its arm and unleashed a dim thunderbolt towards the two Xiantian cultivators. Wu Qi was observing the scene with his divine sense. Carefully, he gave the dark skeleton behind Wei Xiaoxiao a glance, then turned to look at the few Jin Dan human immortals, who were sitting cross-legged and regulating their breaths. Perhaps it was because they had consumed too much energy over a long period of time. No matter it was the dark skeleton or the few Jin Dan human immortals, their energy was nearly depleted. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi suddenly squeezed out from the ground. The sword of greedy wolf transformed into a cold beam and shot out, thrusting straight towards the few Jin Dan human immortals. Chapter 151. The spot where Wu Qi sprung out from underground was less than 300 feet away from a few Jin Dan human immortals, who were sitting cross-legged and regulating their breath. After the sword of greedy wolf had devoured the item spirit formed from the fusion of gold element energies and spatial ripples, the sword beam had vaguely taken on the characteristic of short-distance teleportation, similar to the grand white spatial breaching pearl of innate energy. The speed of the sword beam was incredibly fast. Almost at the moment when it shot out from Wu Qi's fingertip, it had already arrived before the faces of those Jin Dan human immortals. However, among these experienced Jin Dan human immortals, which one of them did not have 2 or 3 life-saving techniques? Then, these Jin Dan human immortals roared furiously at the same time, "How dare you, little brat!" Tens of golden talismans, each measuring 40 to 50 feet tall and 3 feet wide, shot out from the top of these Jin Dan human immortals' heads, transforming into large sheets of golden light that shielded their bodies. The dark sword beam transformed from the sword of greedy wolf wheeled around the tens of overlapping golden light beams and slashed at them. Within the golden light, all the Jin Dan human immortals were thrown off their feet, knocked to the ground by the tremendous force contained in the sword beam. Amidst jarring cracking noises, nearly half of the golden light beams were ripped to shreds, but the rest of the golden light beams were still intact. The light was dazzling. All the Jin Dan human immortals who were knocked to the ground spat out sword beams from their mouths, which transformed into 10 feet long beams and greeted the sword of greedy wolf. However, as they had been digging the iron wall for so many days, they had consumed too much of their energies. As a result, the flying swords they shot out were dimmed, and their power was less than 10% of their usual power. When the nearly 10 sword beams clashed with the sword of greedy wolf, it was as if a child bride had bumped into a fierce mother-in-law. They were so frightened that they retreated hastily with a haggard face. The bodies of 2 human immortals with the weakest cultivation base, who were only early-stage Jin Dan human immortals, trembled, while Chi-Chi coughed out a mouthful of blood. The newly born sword of greedy wolf had already cracked their flying swords, and as their bodies were almost drained to begin with, there was no way they could withstand such a great loss. They nearly fainted and fell to the ground. The 2 human immortals with the strongest cultivation base among them, who were at the last stage of Jin Dan realm, gave a furious roar. They pointed a finger above their heads, and the golden talismans hovering above them suddenly combined into one. Amidst a vague dragon roar, the talismans transformed into a golden dragon as thick as a water tank, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws as it charged towards Wu Qi. These talismans were all excellent quality, the minor golden light protection talisman of heaven and earth, the last life-saving measure prepared by Wei Merchant for these human immortals. For a short period of time, each of these defensive talismans could unleash a defensive strength equal to that of a lower-grade magical treasure wielded by a Jin Dan human immortal. When a few of these talismans were combined into one, they were driven by an incantation and transformed into the minor golden dragon talisman of heaven and earth. With that, it became an offensive talisman with an extraordinary power. Anyone below mid-stage Jin Dan realm, even if they were equipped with a defensive magical treasure, could basically be killed with a single strike. Wu Qi did not have the time to pull back the sword of greedy wolf. Therefore, he could only drive it to tangle with the flying swords of those Jin Dan human immortals. Then, he slapped the sword crown on top of his head. 5 extremely fine beams shot out from the crown, shooting towards the golden dragon at an incredible speed. This tall crown that he had taken out from the treasure pavilion of the sword stems from the Mind Cave abode was also a sharp weapon that could catch people off guard and ambush them. However, in the face of the golden dragon body-piercing talisman, the 5 rays of light had barely flashed when they were swallowed by the golden dragon. The crown on top of his head exploded abruptly, and the hair band used to tie the crown was ripped to shreds as well. Wu Qi felt a severe pain on his scalp, as a small piece of his hair was turned into ashes by the explosion, exposing a large piece of his smooth scalp, making him look bald. Wu Qi was struck dumb with terror. He dared not to bet on how strong the defensive strength of the defensive shirt he had just obtained could be. His eyes went wide, and the silver lotus flower he had just kept shot out from between his brows. The silver lotus flower shone with a dazzling silver light, glinting faintly with 5 colors, and expanded to 1 foot in circumference. Along with a deep, muffled dragon roar, the golden dragon slammed straight into the silver lotus flower. A blinding light burst out, and a large sheet of silver light kept surging out from the silver lotus flower. Countless lotus petals spun rapidly like blades, shredding the arrogant golden dragon into pieces. The golden dragon shattered into countless golden specks, and was devoured by the silver lotus flower as well. The defensive talisman was destroyed by Wu Qi in 1 fell swoop. The few Jin Dan human immortals stared at the scene with great astonishment. Fortunately, 2 late-stage Jin Dan human immortals reacted in time. Without saying a word, they sprayed out 2 specks of bright light from their mouths, which transformed into a jade ruler and a feather fan respectively, thrusting towards Wu Qi. The jade ruler pierced through the air with an ear-splitting whistle as it came smashing down, while the feather fan shook and sprayed out the Samadhi true flame of green, white, and red, rolling up a monstrous heat wave and rushing towards Wu Qi. Without changing his expression, Wu Qi thrust the silver lotus flower towards the jade ruler. A loud clang rang out. The silver lotus flower remained motionless, but the jade ruler was smashed into pieces. The extremely powerful acquired earth element energy contained in the jade ruler was devoured by the silver lotus flower, then injected into Wu Qi's body through the connection between the silver lotus flower and Wu Qi's divine sense. The earth meridians trembled, and the 2 false cores of earth element opened their mouths and devoured the acquired earth element energy. Before long, they sprayed out a dense innate earth element energy, which joined the circulation of the 5 elements. The 2 false cores shone faintly, and the misty cores became slightly more stable. Wu Qi's body sank slightly, as if his body had become heavier, and the strength of his body had increased slightly as well. He threw his head back and let out a few loud laughs, then a 5-colored gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes. The silver lotus flower pounced towards the feather fan like a hungry wolf, absorbing all the Samadhi true fire along its way. Another ear-piercing tearing noise rang out. The feather fan, which could shoot out the Samadhi true fire, was torn to shreds by the razor-sharp silver lotus flower, and the acquired fire element energy contained in it was devoured by the silver lotus flower as well. After devouring the acquired fire element energy, the 2 false cores in Wu Qi's fire meridians emitted a faint red glow and became slightly more stable. The 2 late-stage Jin Dan human immortals, who had unleashed their magical treasures to fight against the enemy, screamed out miserably as a large amount of blood sprayed out from their 7 apertures. Different from flying swords, magical treasures usually contained a considerable part of the cultivator's soul power. Therefore, when the magical treasure was destroyed, it was equivalent to destroying a small part of the cultivator's soul. This was the loss of the source of the soul, and the damage it could do to the cultivator was incomparable. The 2 formidable late-stage Jin Dan human immortals could only see stars flashing before their eyes. Their energy and blood were severely depleted, and they no longer had the strength to fight. Wu Qi casually pointed his finger out. The silver lotus flew forward and smashed into the lower abdomen of one of them, piercing through his body and pulling out a Jin Dan the size of a chicken wrapped in a silver glow. At the same time, he sprayed a mouthful of energy onto the sword of greedy wolf. The pitch-black sword beam trembled abruptly, as 7 wolf heads shot out from it, crazily leaping towards the surrounding enemies. Another 2 human immortals of Jin Dan failed to dodge the attack, and their bodies were struck by the wolf heads formed by the sword beams, opening up a huge and gruesome wound on their bodies. Wolf howls towered into the sky, as 2 pitch-black wolf heads with long glowing tails flew towards Wu Qi at top speed, with 2 Jin Dan in their mouths. Casually, Wu Qi caught the 2 Jin Dan and recalled the silver lotus. He could not help but let out a joyful laugh. Similar to the Jin Dan that Yen Dan and his companions used to imprison human immortals, the reason Wu Qi collected Jin Dan was to absorb its essence for his own use. As long as he had the help of a few Jin Dan, he would be able to save a great amount of time, allowing the 10 false cores in his 5 meridians to form their true cores in the shortest time possible. The sword beam split again. This time, the pitch-black sword beam transformed from the sword of greedy wolf suddenly turned extremely soft and gentle, splitting into several dozens of extremely fine sword beams, gently enveloping those human immortals of Jin Dan. The azure water sword technique of heaven-breaking sword sex shapeless sword technique could transform flying swords into water waves that blotted the sky to attack the enemy. The sword beam was like water, penetrating through every opening, and the sword energy lingering in the air was soft and gentle, like maggots in one's bones, making it extremely difficult to defend against. It was a pretty good sword technique. Furthermore, as Wu Qi was controlling the sword with the innate water energy found in his water meridians, the sword beam contained a wisp of cold and gloomy air, which could penetrate through all the internal organs and bone marrow, making the lethality of the sword beam even stronger. As the several dozens of sword beams shot down, those human immortals of Jin Dan, whose energies were nearly depleted, could no longer defend against them. Once again, a few of them were torn apart by the sword beams, while the Jin Dan was brought back to Wu Qi's hand. In the end, only 2 human immortals of Jin Dan, who had completely depleted their energies and could not even unleash their defensive magical treasures, were left standing with their backs against each other, panting heavily. Controlling 2 extremely dim sword beams, which nearly revealed their true forms, they fought with the sword of greedy wolf. Their bodies were drenched in sweat, and a large puddle of water had formed under their feet. If not because of the desire to live that dominated everything, they would have fallen to the ground and been killed by the sword of greedy wolf. All this happened in a very short period of time. After Wu Qi had killed a few human immortals of Jin Dan, the dark skeleton finally unleashed the thunderbolt, thrusting towards 2 Xiantian cultivators who stood out to fight against Wei Xiaoxiao. It was only when the 2 Xiantian cultivators were ripped to shreds by the thunderbolt that Wei Xiaoxiao finally realized what had happened. She rubbed her eyes in disbelief, staring blankly at the dead bodies scattered all over the ground. Trembling, she pointed her finger at Wu Qi and cried out, "Kill him! Quick, kill him now!" A deep, muffled ghost howl was heard coming out from the dark skeleton's body, as a faint dark mist sprayed out from it. He strode towards Wu Qi, and with just a leap, he had arrived at a place less than 100 feet away from Wu Qi. Spreading both arms, the dark skeleton, who obviously did not have enough strength, waved its water tank-sized fist and thrust it towards Wu Qi with brute force. With a thought in his mind, the silver lotus bloomed before the dark skeleton, expanding to several tens of feet in size from the size of 1 foot. 49 lotus petals were seen swirling with a bright flame, as countless 5-colored beams were seen rushing out from the pistil of the lotus, pulling the dark skeleton into the lotus. A thread of divine flame of order burst out from the tip of the 49 lotus petals, burning the dark skeleton and causing crackling noises to ring out from its body, while the dark mist around it kept melting and disintegrating. Wei Xiaoxiao watched the scene with terror. She screamed hoarsely while performing one incantation gesture after another, trying to control the dark skeleton. However, the silver lotus had isolated all energy ripples from the inside and outside of the skeleton. Countless 5-colored beams, which were as sharp as blades, converged inwardly. Countless bone-cracking noises were heard, as the dark skeleton was forcefully crushed into pieces by this half-man-made, half-natural spirit item. At the same time, the bizarre talisman inside the dark skeleton was burned into ashes by the divine flame of order. Wei Xiaoxiao let out a miserable howl, as blood burst out from her 7 apertures like an explosion. The art of controlling fiend, the fiend devour. Looking at Wei Xiaoxiao's 7 apertures suddenly bursting with blood, as well as the bizarre appearance of countless tiny worms wriggling under her skin, Wu Qi could not help but shake his head. It was true that the art of controlling fiend could summon such powerful and swift fiends, but once the talisman was destroyed, the person who cast the art of controlling fiend would immediately be devoured by the fiend. The feeling was like being bitten by 10,000 ghosts, a first-rate torture under the heaven. The sword beam swept across and killed the last 2 Jin Dan human immortals, who were putting up a desperate struggle, and took away their Jin Dan. After that, Wu Qi transformed into a wild wind and blocked the exit of the mine. The silver lotus transformed into a ball of silver light that measured several hundred feet in circumference, enveloping the remaining cultivators of Wei Merchant. Silently, Wu Qi gave these cultivators a glance, who had completely exhausted their innate energies and could no longer fight back. Shaking his head, he said, "Don't blame me for cutting the weeds and pulling out the roots." The silver lotus closed inwardly, as the sword of greedy wolf swept across all directions. Nearly 100 Xiantian cultivators whose cultivation base was weaker than him were immediately cut into half. Upon seeing this, Wei Xiaoxiao, who was being devoured by the fiend, could not help but scream hoarsely, "Save me! I'll exchange my precious treasure for my life." Chapter 152. After using the silver lotus to block the only entrance and exit of the mine, Wu Qi walked slowly and came next to Wei Xiaoxiao. Wei Xiaoxiao forced out a flattering smile and cried out with a hoarse voice while shivering, "Save me! The devil is attacking me! Use the exorcism spell to save me! I'll exchange my life with a precious treasure. I'll..." Before Wei Xiaoxiao could finish her words, Wu Qi had already pressed his finger on her throat and sealed off her mute acupoint. The innate energies of 5 elements invaded into Wei Xiaoxiao's body like a great mountain, completely sealing off all her meridians and the flow of her qi and blood. Under Wei Xiaoxiao's restless and frightened gaze, Wu Qi took off all her clothes, exposing her fair but bumpy body, where countless earthworm-like objects were moving and squirming rapidly under her skin. Disgusted, Wu Qi looked at Wei Xiaoxiao's frightening body, speechless, and shook his head. Cultivating a devil technique, and it was such a dangerous devil technique, it was not a good idea. Once the devil lost control, she would be devoured into this state, suffering a pain worse than death. What was the point of doing this? Why couldn't she just focus on her cultivation? Wu Qi sighed with mixed emotions. Then, Wu Qi's 10 fingers emitted a faint 5-colored gleam. Starting from Wei Xiaoxiao's head, they slid down her body bit by bit. The 9 heavens and 10 earths spirit searching and secret probing palm incantation from Scroll of Stealing was a technique that could be compared to the seal of minor universal star shifting. The seal of minor universal star shifting could forcibly steal all kinds of natural energies, spirit objects, and all kinds of precious objects that were tangible or intangible. On the other hand, the spirit searching and secret probing palm incantation was said to be able to search for a great 1,000 worlds from a mustard seed, fetch water from the sand, and bloom flowers from the rocks. It was a supreme technique used to search for all kinds of hidden precious treasures. Soundlessly, the finger incantation changed, as tiny talismans condensed from innate energies of 5 elements danced and danced on his fingertips, fusing into Wei Xiaoxiao's body soundlessly. Under the effect of the mystic technique of spirit searching and secret peering palm incantation, Wei Xiaoxiao's skin, muscles, and bones were gradually emitting a faint glow. In the end, her body turned translucent, and all the meridians in her body, as well as the direction of the circulation of her blood and qi, were completely exposed before Wu Qi's eyes. Even the contraction of her brain and the fluctuations of her brain were clearly visible under her translucent skin. Under the powerful effect of the spirit searching and secret peering palm incantation, even Wei Xiaoxiao's rapidly fluctuating mental activity could not hide from Wu Qi's surveillance. With a great panic, Wei Xiaoxiao looked at her upper body which had turned translucent. Panicked, she let out a soundless roar from her throat. She struggled hard, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't move an inch. Not long after that, a faint dark blue glow burst out from all over Wei Xiaoxiao's body. Her body had turned into a transparent existence, like the ripples of water. Only her meridians, blood vessels, internal organs, and many other important parts remained translucent. Everything inside her body was exposed before Wuqi's eyes. He could clearly see that a few meridians in her body were much stronger and wider than the rest, and a stream of dark purple innate energy was flowing slowly in these meridians. So, this is the cultivation technique you are cultivating with? Wuqi looked at Wei Xiaoxiao, who looked as if she had just seen a ghost. He shook his head lightly, smiled and said, "Very good, I'll kindly accept it. Although it is a devil technique, it seems it has quite a lot of miraculous effects. When I have the time in the future, I'll definitely study it." Silently, Wuqi memorized the circulation route of the innate energies in Wei Xiaoxiao's body. He had learned the devil technique she was cultivating with. This was the most powerful and also the most helpless aspect of Scroll of Stealing. No matter it was the 7 foundation establishment technique, the seal of star shifting, or the spirit searching and secret probing palm incantation, all these mystic techniques possessed an endless power, and possessed endless magical abilities. However, there was never a mystic technique or divine ability that could be used in a head-on fight with someone in Scroll of Stealing. There were escape techniques, divine abilities that could be used to decipher various formations, mystic techniques that could be used to break all sorts of defensive mechanisms, and all sorts of unimaginable and unorthodox techniques. However, sword techniques like the Azure Water Sword technique and the Mountain Crumbling Sword technique of Heaven Breaking Sword sect that could be used practically, and some other powerful divine abilities like various thunder techniques, were just too few. Even if there were 1 or 2 sword techniques, they were just like the general principles. What the Scroll of Stealing taught was only the Heaven Stealing technique. After inheriting the Scroll of Stealing, how many benefits and things he could steal would depend on Wuqi's own efforts. At least, he now had the 5 elements sword technique of Heaven Breaking Sword sect, as well as the devil technique that Wei Xiaoxiao was cultivating. As long as he persevered in his cultivation, the number of divine abilities and mystic techniques he could obtain would only increase. After memorizing the circulation path of Wei Xiaoxiao, Wuqi casually circulated a few threads of innate energy and circulated them through those few meridians. Immediately, the 7 holy deities and devils in his spiritual ocean split out a thread of aura from the realm of desire, following the few threads of innate energy and circulating freely through those few meridians. Vaguely, a vague and evil aura spread out from Wuqi's body. Once again, Wei Xiaoxiao's eyes went wide as if she had just seen a ghost. In Wei Merchant, only the lineal descendants would be able to inherit the hidden treasure of 5 ghosts of minor samsara. When cultivated to the most profound level, it would be the 4-9 great demons transporting technique that Lu Buwei had learned. It had the powerful ability to break through the void and transform into an undead heavenly ghost. Wei Xiaoxiao had been cultivating this mystic technique since she was young, and she knew very well how difficult it was to cultivate this mystic technique. However, with just a slight focus of his mind, Wuqi was able to form a thread of unique aura of the hidden treasure of 5 ghosts of minor samsara in his body. This was simply unheard of. However, Wuqi was too lazy to explain to Wei Xiaoxiao all the magical techniques found in Scroll of Stealing. A 5-colored gleam flickered in his eyes, as he discovered a clump of green shadow that was beating rapidly on top of Wei Xiaoxiao's heart, transforming into a green ghost head and biting at her heart meridians from time to time. It was the true form of the black skeleton summoned by Wei Xiaoxiao. When the black skeleton was destroyed, the true form of the devil suffered a severe injury. As it had lost the suppression from the talisman, the true form of the devil immediately rebelled in Wei Xiaoxiao's body, devouring the energy in her heart meridians and extracting her blood essence. He snorted coldly, then casually performed a few incantation gestures, transforming them into a small white hand that reached into Wei Xiaoxiao's body and pulled the green devil out from her body. The fist-sized devil was shapeless and incorporeal. Occasionally, it would transform into a green ghost head, roaring and baring its teeth at Wuqi. Wuqi just sneered and sprayed out a thread of divine flame of order, completely crushing the evil will in the devil's body. It was the pure fiend energy from the heavenly fiend realm that had condensed into the body of the devil. When Wu Qi swallowed this clump of fiend energy into his body, the 7 holy deities and devils in his spiritual ocean immediately cheered and swarmed forward, devouring all the fiend energy. In just the time of a few breaths, the 7 holy deities and devils had condensed into their real bodies, which were just like miniature versions of Wu Qi. However, their faces were filled with various greedy, ferocious and angry expressions, and their bodies were filled with all sorts of evil intents. The 7 holy deities and devils were sitting cross-legged in the middle of Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, and right below them were the actual manifestations of the 5 innate energies, namely water wave, gold mountain, wood forest, flame ocean, and desert. Suddenly, Wei Xiaoxiao's body, whose body was twitching violently, calmed down, and the twisting, worm-like patterns underneath her skin had vanished without a trace. She breathed out a deep sigh of relief, then gave Wu Qi a flattering smile. She wanted to say something, but Wu Qi paid no attention to her, and just kept using the spirit-searching and secret-probing palm incantation to continue examining her body. She truly deserved to be the person in charge of Wei Merchant in Great Yan Dynasty, the lineal granddaughter of Lu Buwei, the treacherous hero of the generation. The good stuff possessed by Wei Xiaoxiao had simply made Wu Qi speechless. There was an acquired spirit pearl of fire element in her spiritual ocean. The bull-sized pearl was bursting with heat, and wherever it went, even metal and rocks would melt into liquid. It was a mighty power. However, it should be a soul-lodging item given by Lu Buwei to Wei Xiaoxiao to suppress her divine soul and evil will, as Wei Xiaoxiao herself did not have the ability to control it. Using the seal of star shifting, Wu Qi extracted the pearl from Wei Xiaoxiao's body. He wiped away the thread of divine sense contained in the pearl, hastily refined it, and swallowed it into his stomach. Silently, he exercised the qi circulating technique of 5 elements, wrapped the pearl with his innate energy, and slowly moved it to his dantian. Immediately, a scorching hot stream rose from the pearl, flowing quickly through Wu Qi's meridians, while the qi circulating technique of 5 elements began to circulate on its own. Wu Qi was overjoyed. With this pearl as a disguise, no one would doubt that he could raise the qi circulating technique of 5 elements to the peak stage of Xiantian realm in a short period of time. A spirit pearl condensed from acquired energies was a rare and precious treasure. Although it could not change one's physique like an innate spirit item, it did have the function of increasing the speed of one's cultivation. Together with the few Jin Dan he obtained today, if he could beg Princess Zhang to protect him as a disguise, it would be reasonable for him to raise the realm of Jin Dan realm in a short period of time. It was nothing more than relying on an external force to form his gold core, which would cause his foundation to be unstable. But, why would Wu Qi care about that? Apart from this acquired spirit fire pearl, there were also 2 flying swords of lower tier magical treasure level, and a coin of lower tier magical treasure level. The coin could be wielded to forcibly take away the flying swords and magical treasures of others. It had a unique function, and was very rare. Apart from that, there was also a gold ingot of lower tier magical treasure level. This gold ingot could be thrown out to hit someone, and its weight was approximately 50,000 kilograms. If any ordinary human immortal of Jin Dan realm was hit by it, he would have his bones broken and his tendons torn. Apart from all these defensive magical treasures and spirit pearls, the most important thing was inside Wei Xiaoxiao's dantian, where a tiny fist-sized wooden figure was intertwined with a thread of her innate blood essence. The wooden figure did not have a face, but was roughly carved into the shape of a human. Its body was shrouded with countless mysterious runes, and vaguely, it was swallowing Wei Xiaoxiao's blood essence and energy essence, producing a very mysterious state of resonance and coexistence with her body. On top of that, Wu Qi could sense that Wei Xiaoxiao's soul had formed some sort of mysterious connection with the wooden figure. Vaguely, the aura of the wooden figure had even suppressed the ripple of Wei Xiaoxiao's soul. Wu Qi breathed out a deep sigh, then carefully executed the seal of minor universal star shifting, cutting off all the connection between the wooden figure and Wei Xiaoxiao's blood essence and soul. After that, he took it out from Wei Xiaoxiao's body, and without hesitation, he forced out a few drops of his prime blood essence and dripped them onto the wooden figure. Immediately, the wooden figure transformed into a clump of green shadow and fused into Wu Qi's body, settling down inside his dantian. Immediately, Wu Qi felt that there was an additional layer of thick and heavy barrier between him and the outside world. The barrier did not stop him from absorbing the natural spirits, but he had a feeling that he was now shrouded in a thick and heavy defensive barrier. No matter it was his fleshly body or his soul, both had an additional layer of protection. Soul replacement puppet. Looking at Wei Xiaoxiao, whose face was filled with despair, Wu Qi shook his head, sighed and said, "What an extravagant Wei merchant. What an extravagant old Mr. Lu Buwei. You've already wasted a soul replacement puppet, and now, you're being given another one to protect yourself." Upon hearing the name, Lu Buwei, Wei Xiaoxiao's body trembled instantly, and her face turned dark purple due to fear. She stared at Wu Qi in despair, and her body began to tremble uncontrollably. Wu Qi twitched his lips, turned to Wei Xiaoxiao and said helplessly, "That's right, you're Lu Buwei's biological granddaughter, aren't you? He is a very amazing old man, but as for you, I can't tell which part of you looks like his granddaughter." After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi smiled and said, "Thank you for giving me these treasures. In order to repay you, I'll spare a thread of your soul for reincarnation." The sort of greedy wolf let out a clear whistle as it thrust forward, cutting Wei Xiaoxiao's neck into two. Casually, he pulled off the storage ring from Wei Xiaoxiao's finger, then slowly rose to his feet. Chapter 153. Apart from the treasures carried by Wei Xiaoxiao, Wu Qi found a total of 17 pieces of lower-grade magical treasures, over 230 pieces of upper-grade, middle-grade, and lower-grade magical items, 578 talismans of various colors, over 2,000 pieces of energy stones, over 200 bottles of poisons, knockout drugs, and aphrodisiacs, and over 300 bottles of medicines for internal and external injuries. However, he did not find even one medicinal pill that could restore his innate energy, as all of them had been consumed by these cultivators who had been working hard to excavate the iron wall. Looking at the surrounding iron wall, which was now riddled with holes and hollows, Wu Qi casually recalled the silver lotus, shrunk it to the size of a fist, then focused all his strength and smashed it onto the iron wall. The silver lotus sunk deeply into the iron wall. After that, Wu Qi cast an incantation gesture, causing the silver lotus to suddenly expand to over 100 feet in circumference. In the next moment, a large piece of iron wall collapsed with a loud rumble, and was crushed into powder by the rapidly spinning lotus petal-shaped halo. At least 300 pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold flew out from the shattered iron wall. Wu Qi let out a loud laugh, then repeated the same action. It was indeed very convenient to have an innate treasure of spirit item level with him. On top of that, the silver lotus itself was condensed from the purest gold element energies, which made it many times stronger and sharper than the iron wall. As if he had gone mad, Wu Qi forcibly expanded the original 1,000 feet circumference pit to 2,000 feet, and revealed about 2,000 to 3,000 pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold. After piling all these spatial breaching spirit gold into a small hill, and piling up all kinds of crystal cores condensed from the accompanying gold element energies into a small hill that was at least 10 times bigger than the previous one, Wu Qi gave his achievement a careful look, then nodded his head satisfyingly. He tidied up the place for a while, then put all the most valuable magical treasures, medicinal pills, and talismans into Wei Xiaoxiao's supreme-grade storage ring, then hung it on his wrist with a thread of ice silk. After that, Wu Qi frowned and took out a flying sword of lower-grade magical item level, and a few explosive talismans. After slaughtering so many people, I can't come out unscathed. Letting out a long sigh, Wu Qi resigned himself to his fate. He grabbed the flying sword and fiercely stabbed a few times at the thick, non-fatal parts of his body. The sword pierced through his body. Then, he detonated a few explosive flame talismans, causing his body to be covered in black and white patches. He looked as pathetic as one could imagine. Flying swords and talismans slashed and drew on the surrounding iron walls, chopping the corpses on the ground into pieces. After that, Wu Qi fabricated a scene where he had gone through a tough battle and finally succeeded by luck. Only then did he let out a heavy sigh and said, "I'm slightly injured, it's best if it's a serious injury. Not only will it be more reasonable, it will also be more meritorious. If it wasn't for this mine, I wouldn't have bothered to waste so much effort." This was the iron mine in Lu Qingfeng's territory, where the spatial breaching spirit gold had been excavated, and its value was simply immeasurable. Logically speaking, such a strategic resource would definitely belong to Great Yan Dynasty. However, Wu Qi wanted to shatter this logic, allowing Lu Qingfeng to continue managing this mine. The spatial breaching spirit gold represented an endless source of wealth, an endless supply of energy stones, spirit pills, talismans, and magical items. Wu Qi had no idea how long he would have to stay in Great Yan Dynasty before he could leave. However, as long as he stayed in Great Yan Dynasty, he would never be able to live without power and wealth. Without a doubt, this mine would allow his power and wealth to soar to a great extent, while Lu Qingfeng's political resources would skyrocket as well. This was beneficial to both of them. Therefore, he had to have this mine in his hands no matter what. Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh and looked at the wounds on his body. He felt that these injuries were not enough to move anyone. He pondered for a while, then pulled out a large blade of fire element and began hacking at his body, leaving dozens of scorched wounds on his body. Wu Qi grimaced in pain, stomped his feet and cursed. If not for the minor reincarnation of 5 elements that had been formed, his body was going through a tremendous transformation, and the recovery ability of his fleshly body had been greatly improved. He would never choose such a method that brought suffering upon himself. Looking at his body, which was now in a complete mess after being tortured by himself, Wu Qi pondered for a while, then simply took out 2 upper-grade flying swords and pierced one on each of his arms. Then, he casually swung his arms and legs, and when he found out that it did not affect his body at all, he twisted his body, transformed into a clump of yellow mist, and plunged into the ground. The innate energy of earth element and gold element blended with his divine sense and spread out in all directions, allowing Wu Qi to thoroughly investigate all the movements in the mine. There was no one in the mine, and even when he reached the exit of the mine, he did not find any signs of living beings. It was not until Wu Qi came out from the mine and came to the exit of the valley that he saw a few respiration tier cultivators of Xiantian realm. They were carefully crouching in the bushes, keeping a vigilant watch over their surroundings. Without wasting any time, Wu Qi switched from the earth escape technique to the wood escape technique. Lightly and quietly, he transformed into a clump of faint green mist and darted through the bushes, reaching out his hand and twisting the necks of the few Xiantian cultivators from behind. Murmuring, Ba, under his breath, Wu Qi collected all the magical items found on their bodies. After that, he pretended to be on the verge of death, falling backward at the entrance of the valley. He took out the token of 8 swallows and the tooth token that represented his identity as Marquis Tianyun. Casually, Wu Qi dripped a drop of blood onto the token and the tooth token. Immediately, 2 bright beams soared into the sky, transforming into 2 extremely tiny beams and flying towards Ji City. It was a restrictive spell that was found in the token and the identity token of all the high-ranking officials and nobles of Great Yan Dynasty. It was called the 10,000 Miles Spark Message. As long as one dripped a drop of blood essence onto it, an urgent message would be immediately sent to Ji City, and the city would arrange for the rescue force according to the status of the token and the identity token. The token of 8 swallows was a special token that was equal to the status of Chief General Jing Ku and the other generals. Wu Qi was pondering that the rescue force should be arriving soon. Lying at the entrance of the valley and feeling extremely bored, Wu Qi simply grabbed the corpses of the few Xiantian cultivators and cut them open with his sword, spraying the warm blood all over the ground. Naturally, his body was also covered with blood, looking like a tragic scene of someone who had just survived a bitter battle. After waiting for less than 1 hour, a rapid noise of wind piercing was heard coming from a far distance. A nearly 1,000 feet long golden beam was seen approaching at top speed, surrounded by a few white and green beams of similar scale, and nearly 1,000 bright beams. Further away in the sky, there were even more sword beams flying towards them. However, their flying speed was slightly slower, and there was still quite a distance between them and Wu Qi. Looking at the approaching sword beams with astonishment, Wuqi could not help but cry out in astonishment, Yan Dan is here personally? Is it really necessary? While he was staring blankly at the approaching sword beams, Yan Dan, Jing Ke, Gao Jianli, and a few others had brought nearly 1,000 Jin Dan human immortals and landed at the entrance of the valley. Wuqi could not help but feel his scalp go numb. Nearly 1,000 Jin Dan human immortals, was this the true overall strength of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial clan? On the surface, Heaven-Breaking Sword sect only had 36 Jin Dan human immortals. Furthermore, Heaven-Breaking Sword sect was the strongest sect among all 13 immortal sects of Great Yan Dynasty. If that was the case, all these sects only had at most 500 to 600 Jin Dan human immortals. That was less than half of the overall strength of Jin Dan human immortals that Yan Dan had shown today. Even if those sects had hidden spies just like Niaounu, perhaps they would still be no match for Great Yan Dynasty. No wonder Great Yan Dynasty could forcibly suppress all 13 immortal sects with the power of the imperial court. The difference in overall strength was simply too shocking. Wuqi rose to his feet on the verge of collapsing. Right after he stood up, he fell to his knees with a thud. The flying sword on his left arm was shaken by the force, and with a creaking noise, it cut through his flesh and slid down half an inch. The tragic scene made Yan Dan's eyes go wide. Apart from Jing Ke, who was looking at Wuqi with an appreciative expression on his face, all the others had their brows knitted tightly. Gao Jianli was shaking his head, frowning and looking somewhere else. Marquis Tianyun, how did you end up like this? Where have you been these last few days? Yan Dan strode forward and held Wuqi up, then asked with a loud voice, Ji City is in a great mess. We've led an army to wipe out all the rebels and traitors who tried to stir up trouble. Right after we finished cleaning up the mess today, we received your letter asking for help. Hee, we thought you had been killed by someone during the chaos of war. Duke Yanlu even cried bitterly when he heard that. Lu Qingfeng cried bitterly. Wuqi laughed dryly, then said while swaying, Your Majesty, I followed the people from Wei Merchant to this place, and I discovered a great secret. No wonder those people from Wei Merchant are plotting to seize the mineral vein in Duke Yan Li's territory. It turns out that there is a spatial breaching spirit gold in this place. Oh, what? At first, Yan Dan answered disapprovingly, but suddenly, his tone rose rapidly, What? Spatial breaching spirit gold. The core spirit gold used to construct teleportation formations. The spatial breaching spirit gold that can greatly reduce the consumption of energy stones. The spatial breaching spirit gold that can greatly increase the teleportation distance of teleportation formations. Wuqi, the crime of deceiving the emperor is punishable by death. Wuqi didn't say a word. With a flip of his palm, he fished out a piece of spatial breaching spirit gold from his storage ring. Such a big piece of spatial breaching spirit gold could be considered as an extremely rare treasure. If it was used to construct a teleportation formation, it could be used to construct a large teleportation formation that could span a distance of tens of millions of miles, and teleport nearly 1,000 people at a time. A teleportation formation that could teleport 1,000 people at a time, and did not require too many energy stones to construct, the value of this piece of spatial breaching spirit gold had definitely risen to the level of strategic importance for the country. A frightening green gleam shone from Yan Dan's eyes, as he stretched his arm out and grabbed towards the spatial breaching spirit gold in Wuqi's hand. Hastily, Wuqi shoved the spatial breaching spirit gold into his storage ring, then murmured under his breath, Your Majesty, don't be in such a hurry. There are many more in this cave. As Your Majesty, why would you snatch the spatial breaching spirit gold? What he said made Yan Dan feel a sweetness in his heart, and he nearly threw up a mouthful of blood. However, he was too lazy to argue with Wuqi. Casually, he pulled out 2 flying swords from Wuqi's body, threw a few bottles of healing and life-saving spirit pills concocted by the imperial clan to him, and cried out loudly, Quickly lead the way. Could there really be spatial breaching spirit gold here? Yan Dan was in a hurry to enter the mine. But, as the emperor of Great Yan Dynasty, even if he wanted to enter the mine, the guards accompanying him dared not to let him enter the mine so recklessly. After a series of thorough investigations and surveys, they made sure there were no ambushes or traps in the mine. Only then, led by Wu Qi, Yan Dan strode into the mine. Upon entering the mine, Yan Dan, Jing Ke, Gao Jianli, and all the core members of Great Yan Dynasty immediately fixed their eyes on the small hill made from 2,000 to 3,000 pieces of spatial breaching spirit gold. Then, they glanced around and saw all the spirit gold of various sizes embedded in the surrounding iron walls. Yan Dan couldn't help but breathe faster and said, "What a great contribution. Marquis Tianyun, the contribution this time is beyond words. With these spatial breaching spirit gold, all the kingdoms of Great Yan Dynasty will be united as one, and those vassal kingdoms will." With a subtle expression, Yan Dan exchanged a glance with Jing Ke and Gao Jianli. Wu Qi knew that some vassal kingdoms were going to be in deep trouble. In the future, wherever the teleportation formation reached, it would be the territory under the direct jurisdiction of Great Yan Dynasty. Thus, those vassal kingdoms who conspired to rebel this time would no longer have the need to exist. Even those vassal kingdoms who behaved themselves would have their rights taken back by Great Yan Dynasty after a few years. However, none of this had anything to do with Wu Qi. What did the life and death of others have to do with him? He just pulled Yan Dan's sleeve, put on an expression of loyalty to the kingdom and said, "Your Majesty, this mine is the property under the name of our young master. You see, for the sake of this mine, I've risked my life." Yan Dan, who was immersed in the wild joy, gave Wu Qi a glare. Chapter 154. Half a month later, all of Wu Qi's injuries had recovered, but Wu Qi still hadn't figured out how Yan Dan's spell had changed. He had merely tricked Lao Ai, the old demon, and did not make Lu Qingfeng o Princess Yingchuan a favor. After that, he made a fool out of Wei Xiaoxiao by turning the tables on the men she sent to ambush him and capturing some of them alive. Then, there was this sudden, storm-like purge. It was a true purge, and the cruelty of it shocked even Wu Qi. When he came back from the mine, Lu Qingfeng, who was overjoyed, told him what happened in the mine during the few days. Wu Qi could not help but shake his head, deeply touched by the cruelty of the imperial clan. Among the 100 sects of Great Yan, 7 of them had their clan leaders beheaded, while several tens of thousands of their clan members were punished. Together with their personal guards, wives, children, and many others, nearly 500,000 people were beheaded, exiled, or imprisoned for life in just one day and one night. Their situation was so miserable that it made all the clan leaders from other sects look at them from the corner of their eyes. All of them were trembling with fear, and cold sweat was streaming down their backs. However, the name of 100 great sects of Great Yan Dynasty still existed. In recent years, Yan Dan had given birth to some more sons, and from them, he selected 7 sons with outstanding talents and abilities to inherit the name of these few sections. Apart from the fact that there were fewer members of the imperial clan, the name of 100 sects of Great Yan Dynasty had not changed at all. Apart from the 7 clan leaders who had their entire families executed, there were tens of thousands of officials who were punished. Qin Qingshui was forced to resign from his position as the chief supervisor of the Central Wind Guard due to dereliction of duty, negligence, incompetence, and other evaluations. Now, he had become an idle man. Hao Ying's family's position of Minister of Justice was also taken away. Among the 3 prime ministers and 9 ministers, except for Gao Jianli, the others were practically replaced. The old influential officials had fallen, and the new influential clans had risen. Great Yan Dynasty had completed a bloody change of power. It was the crown prince, Yan Qijuan, who personally presided over the purge of the 7 clan leaders and all the influential officials. It was said that the 7 clan leaders were coveting the position of crown prince, which had greatly infuriated Yan Qijuan. Therefore, he had raised his butcher's knife and turned Ji City into a river of blood. Among the 8 princes, Yan Xianqian was reprimanded by Yan Dan for 6 hours. His position was not changed, but his title of nobility was reduced. Half of his private army was reduced, and half of his fief was taken back as well. What puzzled Wu Qi was that Yan Dan did not touch Lao Ai in Yan Xianqin's mansion, and he had never heard anything related to Lao Ai. He had no idea how Yan Dan was planning this. Apart from these unfortunate influential officials, a couple dozens of clubs belonging to various vassal kingdoms in Great Yan Dynasty were massacred by the Blood Swallow army. Many common people were involved in the massacre, and their entire families were killed as well. Half of the martial clubs and guilds in the mighty Martial Avenue were related to many influential officials who had committed crimes. The Blood Swallow Army and City Defense Army had besieged many martial clubs in the mighty Martial Avenue, and the battle lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. Several thousand martial clubs of various sizes were wiped out, and half of the mighty Martial Avenue was razed to the ground. Meanwhile, the main force of Great Yan Dynasty, led by Yu Yi and some other military officers, had set out to attack those rebellious vassal kingdoms. This was going to be a war that would last for a long time, as the territory of Great Yan Dynasty was too vast. Even with the help of other vassal kingdoms that were loyal to Great Yan Dynasty, this war would not end in a short period of time. Regarding all the above, the official explanation of Great Yan Dynasty was that Wu Qi, Marquis of Tianyun, had cooperated with the Swallow Army, Scouting Office, and Blood Swallow Army to thoroughly investigate the rebellion in the vassal kingdoms, and the assassination of Yan Buji, Duke of Yanlu. Under the careful planning of Wu Qi, he had risked his life and personally arrived at the scene, drawing out the mastermind of the rebellion, Wei Merchant, and slaughtering all the traitors and traitors, bringing peace back to Great Yan Dynasty. That was the official explanation. As for Wu Qi himself, he still had no idea how the Swallow Army, Scouting Office, and Blood Swallow Army investigated the case, and the credit was given to him. His fief had increased from 130 cities in the south of Huaiyang to 300 cities, which was an increase of more than half. But at the same time, the number of his enemies had increased abruptly. At least, from all the vassal kingdoms, the number of people who wanted to kill him was now at least 1 million. Putting on a bitter face, Wu Qi complained to Lu Qingfeng, feeling that he was really innocent. Yan Dan had asked him to cooperate with Jing Ku and Gao Jianli in investigating the case of Yan Buji's assassination. Yet, he hadn't done any investigation yet, and how did such a world-shaking result come out? On top of that, all the credit had been given to him. He felt that he had once again become the bait for Yan Dan, and he had no idea who he was trying to lure out. It was a bad feeling, an extremely bad feeling. Therefore, after making sure that Yan Dan had handed over the spatial breaching spirit gold mine to Lu Qingfeng, Wu Qi hastily urged Lu Qingfeng to set off, getting ready to carry out the plan which they had been preparing for a long time. He wanted Tai clan to break away from the Lu kingdom and form their own power, while Tai clan, the Lu kingdom, and the Lishan kingdom would divide the Gao Ling kingdom among themselves. At the same time, Wu Qi was going to Meng Mountains, looking for a secluded energy vein with verdant hills and clear waters, where he could build an immortal's cave that was as cunning as a rabbit with 3 burrows. While Lu Qingfeng was preparing everything, and also summoned Princess Ying Chuan and the emissary of the Lishan kingdom, Wu Qi brought some men and hurried to Garden of Zhanglu. During the battle at the city gate, Princess Zhanglu was severely wounded, especially when she was struck by the dark skeleton transformed from the fiend, which caused her to suffer a severe injury. After being busy for so many days, Wu Qi had to pay her a visit. However, it seemed that Princess Zhanglu was severely wounded, and had been in a secluded cultivation. Wearing a long face, Bai Zhu'er and Bai Zu'er had stopped Wu Qi a few times. Left with no other choice, Wu Qi asked Bai Zhu'er and Bai Zu'er to pay his respects to Princess Zhanglu, and only then did he return to Duke Yanli's mansion. On the night before he set off, Wu Qi had secretly crafted 3 small minor universal teleportation formation discs, which could carry up to 10 people at most. He placed them at the bottom of the lake in the backyard of Duke Yanli's mansion, at the sewer outside the mansion, and at a remote residential house in Ji City. The owner of this residential house was a spy from a vassal kingdom who had participated in the rebellion and had been hiding in Ji City, and his entire family was executed. After that, The house was taken over by Great Yan Dynasty, and was quickly auctioned off by the government. With no effort, Wu Qi bought the house, then placed a teleportation formation discs in the dry well located in the backyard of the house. After all the preparations were done, early next morning, Wu Qi and his company arrived at the imperial palace of Great Yan Dynasty. Wu Qi, Lu Qingfeng, Luo Kadi, Ma Yang, Meng Xiaobai, Zhang Hu, Hu Wei, and a few other trusted personal guards, together with Princess Ying Chuan and her attendants, and the emissary of Lishan Kingdom who was beaming with joy, came to a barbican located at the southwest of the imperial palace. The so-called barbican was actually a city within a city. It was located at the edge of the imperial city, a square-shaped city that measured about 1,000 feet in both width and length, surrounded by a high wall. The entire wall was made of metal, and countless powerful defensive formations were engraved on it. There were also at least 10 human immortals of Jin Dan Kingdom guarding this place all year round. There were nearly 100 towering watchtowers and watchtowers, as well as several thousand ballistae and MO machines, which had completely sealed off this place. These were just the defensive forces on the surface. Standing at the entrance of the barbican, Wu Qi could sense an extremely powerful energy reaction coming from underneath the barbican. He reckoned there was a self-destruct formation underneath, and it was stacked with a huge amount of fire element energy stones. Once the defensive formation on the perimeter was breached, the formation would be activated. Unless it was in existence with the cultivation base of Heaven Immortal, he or she would be blasted into nothingness. The ground of the barbican was built with a large number of smooth jade slabs, and on top of it was a complicated formation, measuring several hundred feet in diameter. A couple dozens of jade slabs, the size of a water tank, were hovering above the formation. Each of these jade slabs was engraved with complicated lines of formation, and a large amount of energy stones were inlaid on them, glinting with a dazzling light. As Lu Qingfeng was using the teleportation formation of Great Yan Dynasty to travel to the Lu Kingdom under the guise of Zhuoguizheng Mansion, all the energy stones were paid by the national treasury of Great Yan Dynasty. If not, the cost of teleporting over 1,000 people to the Lu Kingdom would be more than enough to bankrupt the entire Lu Kingdom, or empty all of Lu Qingfeng's current wealth. At this moment, a large number of imperial eunuchs were seen carrying large bags of energy stones on their backs, carefully inserting them into the holes of the formation. There were also a few human immortals of Jin Dan Kingdom inspecting around the formation, and from time to time, performing incantation gestures to check the stability of the formation. While Wu Qi was watching these imperial eunuchs, Princess Ying Chuan had already come next to Wu Qi, bringing along a fragrant breeze. She gently held his left arm with both of her hands. With an ambiguous blush on her face, Princess Ying Chuan giggled and said, "Marquis Tianyun, you are truly an amazing man. The entire Great Yan Dynasty is in a mess because of you. What is going on here? Too many people have been killed in the past few days. The entire Ji city is filled with the smell of blood." Wu Qi turned his head and looked at Princess Ying Chuan. Suddenly, he laughed and said, "Could it be that princess doesn't know the details?" Princess Ying Chuan gazed at Wu Qi with a hidden bitterness in her eyes, sighed and said, "Ying Chuan is just the daughter of the Lu Kingdom's monarch. In Ji City, what is she worth?" Wu Qi gazed deeply at Ying Chuan, spread his arms, smiled bitterly and said, "Actually, apart from the incident of Shi Martial Club, where I received a report saying that Shi Tianma was related to the assassination of Duke Buji, and that's why I went there to investigate it. As for the rest, Wu Qi really has no idea." Wu Qi is just a spear, used by His Majesty and Gao Jianli to scare people. In fact, Wu Qi has no idea what exactly happened this time. Her eyes flickered, then Princess Ying Chuan continued with a soft voice, "That day, His Majesty suddenly brought a group of people to Wei Merchant. When they met, Wei Merchant immediately activated the formation and besieged His Majesty. Could it be that even Marquis Tianyun doesn't know about this? Why did His Majesty go to Wei Merchant? Why?" Wu Qi interrupted Princess Ying Chuan. Without batting an eyelid, he retracted his arm, chuckled and said, "And Ying Chuan, Wu Qi, and Lu Suifeng, Marquis Lu, are the best of friends. He took a few steps back and no longer paid any attention to Princess Ing Chuan, who was trying to flirt with him. He could vaguely sense the shadow of Lao Ai behind Princess Ing Chuan's back. Perhaps, this scoundrel had realized that something had gone out of his control, and was trying to find the answer from Wu Qi. It seemed like Wu Qi's surprise attack on Sheer Martial Club had given Lao Ai a great shock. However, Wu Qi himself was puzzled. He had no idea what Yan Dan, Gao Jianli, and the others knew, and what they had done. So, what could he say? It seemed like he could only continue to be puzzled. Suddenly, the formation burst into a dazzling glow, and a crystal-clear cry was heard coming from the 12 jade slabs placed in the middle of the formation. A Jin Dan human immortal shouted, "It's done. Everyone, you can teleport now." Chapter 155. The light of the teleportation formation gradually dimmed. The scene in front of Wu Qi and his company changed, and they found themselves in another place. They were surrounded by tall walls, similar to the teleportation formation in the southwest corner of the Imperial Palace of Ji City. However, the defensive strength was at least 100 times weaker. There were only a few dozen cultivators of Xiantian realm patrolling around the teleportation formation. It was a totally different scene compared to the 10 human immortal assistants of Great Yan Imperial Palace, Jin Dan. Wu Qi and his company walked out of the teleportation formation. The formation blinked again, as more people were teleported over one after another. A group of men and women clad in luxurious outfits greeted them. Even though they were still far away from them, they were still shouting, "Welcome to Lu Kingdom, Duke Yan Lu, Zhuo Guizheng," and "Welcome to Great Yan Dynasty, Marquis of Tianyun." Countless imperial servants and palace maids were kneeling on the ground from far away, kowtowing and greeting without raising their heads. Only a couple dozens of men and women were led by Tai Yuewu, who was beaming with joy. Qingfeng. Tai Yuewu tilted her head up and smilingly looked at Lu Qingfeng, who was walking at the front of the group. Lu Qingfeng bowed respectfully to Tai Yuewu and the few men standing beside her. "Your son, Lu Qingfeng, offers greeting to my grandfather, my uncles, and my mother." Lu Wenrua, clad in a brocade robe and having a haggard face, squeezed his way out from the crowd. With a dry smile on his face, he greeted Lu Qingfeng, "Qingfeng, no matter how much Liang Lu family has wronged you, it is all thanks to our great efforts that you can smoothly take over the position of Duke Yan Lu. But your mother has actually written a divorce letter and divorced me. Isn't this a little too much? People from Liang Lu family." Wu Qi gave Lu Wenrua a look, then crooked his finger and beckoned Yan Bugue over. "Drag him away and beat him up. Have the scouting office stationed in the Lu Kingdom thoroughly investigate Liang Lu family's misdeeds of violating the law and discipline, oppressing the people, committing all sorts of crimes, and feeding off the people." Yan Bugue coughed lightly and casually gave a signal with his eyes. A group of scouting officers swarmed forward like wolves and tigers, dragging the panic-stricken Lu Wenrua and the people of the Lu family away. Not long after, the sound of wooden boards hitting one's buttocks could be heard from outside. Each sound was crisp and clear, and it was very pleasing to the ear. Wu Qi sneered, shook his head and said, "Our young master's father is the former Duke of Yan Lu, Duke Buji. How dare this Mr. impersonate our young master's father without any reason? How reckless!" Everyone present accepted Wu Qi's point of view and nodded in agreement. Standing next to Tai Yuewu was a white-haired old man with a tall stature and an imposing manner. He even nodded at Wu Qi in a friendly manner. This old man was the Marquis of Yuanyang, Tai Kaishan. He knew that many of Lu Qingfeng's decisions came from Wu Qi, and the plan to establish Tai clan as an independent kingdom was also from Wu Qi's plan. Therefore, he had a very good impression of Wu Qi. Amidst the crowd, there was a middle-aged man with a skinny body, a handsome appearance, and a graceful and elegant appearance. He was clad in a black robe, holding a folding fan made of jade in his hand. After Lu Qingfeng and his mother's family had finished greeting each other, he quickly took a few steps forward, bowed deeply to Lu Qingfeng and Wu Qi and said, "Lu Wuyo offers greeting to Duke Yan Lu, Duke Qingfeng, and Marquis Tianyun, Marquis Wu Qi. Hastily, Lu Qingfeng took a step forward and helped Lu Wuyo to his feet. He smiled faintly and said, "There is no need to be overly courteous, Your Majesty. I believe Your Majesty and my grandfather have already come to a decision regarding the purpose of my visit. This is the emissary of Lishan Kingdom, Gao Sheng, the youngest brother of the king of Lishan Kingdom. Now that the three parties have met, let's seize the time and get everything done. Do not give the Gao Ling Kingdom any time to react." Lu Wuyo, Tai Kaishan, and Gao Sheng answered together. An unconcealable excitement could be seen flashing in their eyes. The Gao Ling Kingdom could be considered as a powerful kingdom in the western border region, with a vast territory. Once the Gao Ling Kingdom was divided among three families, each of them would get a lot of benefits. With such a good thing happening, they had to speed up their work, dismembering the Gao Ling Kingdom as soon as possible. Otherwise, the longer the delay, the more problems would arise, and the more the outsiders would interfere. There wasn't even a banquet as usual. Under the leadership of Lu Qingfeng, the three parties met, and immediately began to mobilize their forces, launching all kinds of plans to take down the Gao Ling Kingdom. Before this, Wu Qi had analyzed all the aspects that should be paid attention to for Lu Qingfeng. Now, when Lu Qingfeng mobilized all the forces, he really had the demeanor of a great general. As the saying goes, devise a plan in the dark, and decide the victory from 1,000 miles away. It was nothing more than this. On the other hand, Wu Qi didn't participate in this operation, which would allow Lu Qingfeng to show off his skills and gain some political credit. Together with Meng Xiaobai and the men of Meng village, he brought along a huge amount of money, resources, and weapons, forming a long convoy. Under the protection of several thousand elite soldiers of the Lu Kingdom, he headed straight for Little Meng City. Because of the spatial breaching spirit gold, it would be very convenient for them to travel back and forth from Ji City in the future. Lu Qingfeng was going to build a minor universal teleportation formation in Little Meng City. Therefore, Lao He would be the acting city lord of Little Meng City. Before Lu Qingfeng could find a suitable person to replace Lao He would have to stay in Little Meng City for a long period of time, helping Lu Qingfeng to take care of all the affairs in Little Meng City, and even the entire Three Mountains province. Just like the agreement between Lu Qingfeng, Tai Yuewu, and Princess Ing Chuan, the entire Three Mountains province would become Lu Qingfeng's private property, and all the taxes collected from it would go into Lu Qingfeng's personal pocket. After traveling day and night, half a month later, the convoy arrived at Little Meng City without a hitch. Meng Xiaobai and his men, whose cultivation base and knowledge had both skyrocketed, had returned to Meng village. This had caused a great sensation in Meng village. The investment of a huge amount of money, resources, and armaments had made all the elders of Meng village dance with joy, unable to say a single word. According to Wu Qi's plan, Meng village would be transformed from a village with a weak defense into a fortress with a very powerful combative force. With Meng fortress as the core, in the future, several dozens of new villages would be built in the depth of Meng mountains, and more armies would be stationed there. Wu Qi had taken Meng mountains as his and Lu Qingfeng's private land. No matter it was the energy stones, ores, herbs, skins, and other rare treasures found in the mountains, they would all turn into an endless source of wealth, providing for himself and Lu Qingfeng's cultivation. In this plan, they needed a huge amount of population to supply the future Meng fortress and the many newly built villages. Lu Qingfeng was devising a strategy to dismember the Gao Ling Kingdom. Once the three powers had annexed the Gao Ling Kingdom, a large number of common people would be forced to migrate to the Three Mountains province, becoming the residents of the Three Mountains province. They would then supply the Meng fortress and those villages, contributing to the development of Meng mountains. Wu Qi had made up his mind to bite off a big piece of fat meat from the rich and fertile Meng mountains. After handing over the important task of building Meng fortress to the experienced and steady Lao He and a group of elders of Meng village, Wu Qi casually gave them some instructions, then he entered Meng mountains alone. He refused to follow them, and instead told them that he was going to Meng mountains to seek a breakthrough, as he had vaguely found an opportunity to form the Jin Dan. Under Wu Qi's insistence, he finally got rid of all the people and entered Meng mountains alone. After walking several tens of miles along a small path that led into the mountains from the side of Meng village, there was no other path in front of him. Everywhere he could see was a primeval forest that towered into the clouds. All sorts of rare and strange birds and beasts were seen flying back and forth, and a very dense and wild aura was blowing at his face. Standing on the treetop of a huge tree that stood nearly 1,000 feet tall, Wu Qi threw his glance into the distance. About 1,000 miles away, he saw a group of mountains hidden amidst the forest. Concentrating his energy in his eyes, he looked into the distance, and he could see some faint clouds gathering in the sky above the mountain range. It should be an unusual phenomenon caused by the natural energies rising from the underground energy veins. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi exercised his movement skill and sprinted toward the mountain range, which was filled with a very dense fragrance and a strange fishy smell of soil. An immortal's cave was not enough for him. In Wu Qi's opinion, if he wanted to be truly safe, he would need at least 10 immortals' caves within the circumference of 100,000 miles in Meng Mountains. Regardless of whether he would need them in the future or not, it would be better for him or the people around him to prepare some backup plans. The mountain breeze was blowing from the opposite direction. Wu Qi did not ride on his flying sword, instead, he just exercised his movement skill and glided forward. 10 false cores were constantly absorbing and unleashing innate energies of 5 elements. His body was shrouded in a 5-colored gleam, and he was sprinting toward the mountain range at the speed of a speeding horse. There were no powerful demon beasts in this mountain range, only some wild and ferocious birds and beasts with extremely strong bodies. However, it was fine if these birds and beasts did not come and provoke him, but once they showed any signs of attacking him, the sword of greedy wolf would immediately transform into a large sheet of water wave and sweep out, shredding these birds and beasts into powder. A huge amount of blood essence would be absorbed into the sword, gradually nourishing it and improving its quality. After sprinting for over 4 hours, Wu Qi had finally arrived at the foot of the mountain range. It was a small mountain range with a circumference of several hundred miles, and there were nearly 1,000 mountains of different sizes. A strange gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes, as he could clearly see the movement of the natural energies from the underground energy veins underneath the mountain range. He nodded his head satisfyingly, then sprinted straight into a canyon located right in the middle of the mountain range. The canyon was about 100 miles long, and about 7 to 8 miles wide. There were lakes and streams in the canyon, forests and grasslands, as well as a stretch of rolling hills. Right underneath the canyon were the 3 spirit caves, which were the largest energy veins in this mountain range. One of them was located under a lake, one was located under a hill, and the last one was poking through the ground, penetrating into a sunken cliff. Putting aside the lake and the hill, Wu Qi came to the cliff, which stood over 2,000 feet tall and was fully covered with ancient pine trees and wisterias. The cliff was entirely greenish-gray in color, and because it was nourished by the underground energy veins all year round, the rocks on the cliff were smooth like jade, glinting brilliantly under the sunlight. Underneath the cliff was a dense black pine forest. Underneath the pine trees were all kinds of ancient herbs, and 2 groups of monkeys lived in the forest, one with golden and the other silver fur. When Wu Qi arrived, the 2 groups of monkeys were confronting each other, fighting over a 10,000-year-old ginseng grass that had already borne fruits. Wu Qi descended from the sky while laughing out loud, then uprooted the ginseng grass and shoved it into his storage ring. Glancing at the 2 groups of monkeys, who were staring at him with their mouths wide open, Wu Qi roared out, "Get lost! This place is mine! You bunch of monkeys!" Frightened by Wu Qi's roar, the 2 groups of monkeys turned around and fled immediately. Wu Qi raised his head proudly, looked at the cliff, and nodded satisfyingly. This was a good place to set up a cave abode. Chapter 156. He took a detour around the bottom of the cliff, determined the direction of the underground energy veins, and buried 12 huge formation discs in the black pine forest, each measuring several tens of feet in circumference. There were 12 formation pillars on each of these formation plates, and all of them were made of wood, water, and wood materials. They were also inlaid with spirit stones of the three elements, and the majority of the spirit stones were of the wood and water elements. Wu Qi did not dare to neglect. He hurriedly cast out the silver lotus and blocked it outside the cliff. No matter how much spirit qi gushed out from the cliff, it was all swallowed by the silver lotus in one breath. The silver lotus gradually became 5 distinct colors, 5 halos flowed ceaselessly on the lotus, making this spirit object extraordinarily magnificent and magical, full of a powerful aura. On the stone bed in front of the skeletons, Wu Qi threw down a lower-rank flying sword, a middle-rank magical protective robe. He even took off the magical long boots he was wearing and threw them on the stone bed. These things were not of much use to him, but they were the best to decorate this cave dwelling. Other than a few magical items, he also threw a few inconspicuous lower-rank spirit pills on the bed. He deliberately pulled out most of the corks of the spirit pills. This way it would not take long for the spirit pills to completely evaporate. Even a Daluo Golden Immortal would not be able to figure out what was in the bottle. Looking at the turbulent giant river that was also rolling from the east to the west, Wu Qi stopped the impulse to move forward. After settling everything, Wu Qi carefully took out 2 dark green bodies from his storage ring in the last cave abode named Underhand Mansion. Their bodies were stiff, but showed no signs of decay or deterioration. He arranged the formation discs into 2 concentric circles, with 3 on the inside and 9 on the outside. Then, he guided a part of the underground energies and injected them into the discs. Carefully, he performed a few hand incantations and triggered the illusory sky-bewildering formation of 7 emotions and 6 desires carved on the discs. The space around them twisted slightly, and the light in the black pine forest dimmed by an insignificant amount. If Wu Qi hadn't been paying attention to his surroundings, he probably wouldn't have noticed the change in the lighting. Unknowingly, Wu Qi had constructed over 20 secret palaces in the vast Meng Mountains, and over 30 backup wilderness teleportation formations. In the process of arranging these cave residences, Wu Qi had also collected countless medicinal herbs and rare minerals in the forest. He had recorded the locations of hundreds of rare mineral veins, their approximate storage, and the quality of their products. These 2 corpses were none other than the corpses of Shi Tianma and his son. That day, Meng Xiaobai and his men pretended to leave the city to bury them, but in the end, they were sent back to Wu Qi. During this period of time, Wu Qi was in a hurry and had no time to absorb them. But now, Wu Qi smiled. More than 300 miles away from the Great River, he found a high peak in a mountain range where he could overlook the Great River and opened his last secret residence there. For this secret residence, he had used up all the formation discs and more than 90% of the energy stones he had, using them to construct several hundred interlocking formations. Only Wu Qi, who possessed the scroll of stealing, could construct such a formation. If it were any other cultivator, just the conflict of these formations would be enough to blow the entire mountain up into the sky. After he finished constructing the first secret residence, Wu Qi had also deployed countless misleading formations and traps nearby. Only then did he leave this nameless valley and go deep into Meng Mountains. Along the way, he kept searching for the places where energy veins gathered, or the barren hills and treacherous rivers. Carefully, he opened up one secret residence after another, which he could use as an escape route. Because of his current cultivation base, in just one short month, he had already gone over 100,000 miles into Meng Mountains. A faint mist began to rise from the ground, and a chilly breeze rose from the ground in the black pine forest, bringing with it the faint moaning, and flirting sounds of young girls, which slowly drifted back and forth in the forest, spreading the mist in all directions. Very soon, the black pine forest was shrouded in a very faint mist. The mist was no different from the morning mist that naturally formed in the natural world. Once the sun appeared, it would shrink back to the ground, and no one could see anything unusual about it. Breathing out a satisfied sigh, Wu Qi took out the sword of Greedy Wolf, unleashing a sword beam and hacking at the cliff wall, carving out a total of 3 deep pits, each measuring several tens of feet in circumference. After that, he buried the other 12 formation discs into these pits, then filled them up with rocks and crushed rocks. Finally, he sprayed out a stream of flame and burned all the rocks into one. After that, he performed the incantation gesture and activated the illusory sky-bewildering formation in the cliff. Immediately, a very faint mist sprayed out from the cliff wall, merging with the water vapor in the black pine forest. The shadowy figure who inherited Wuqi's scroll of stealing had taught Wuqi all sorts of secret palaces, which were simply unimaginable. The shadowy figure had at least hundreds of thousands of secret palaces in the universe, each of which was located in a variety of unimaginable perilous lands, dangerous lands, and all kinds of unexpected places. Each of these secret palaces had powerful restrictive spells that were 1,000,000 times more powerful than this little cave abode, as well as all kinds of life-saving measures, as well as countless spirit pills, miraculous medicines, and escape tools. Rock after rock was hacked into pieces by the sword beam. Wuqi stored all the rock he mined into his storage ring, then brought them far away from the forest. After that, he exercised a mystic technique and hacked them into pieces, then threw them far away. All the rock had been cleaned thoroughly, leaving no trace behind. In the stone chamber at the back was a stone bed. Wuqi threw a hassock made of coarse grass he bought from Ji City onto the stone bed. On top of the hassock, Wuqi carefully placed the skeleton of a cultivator with the cultivation base of embryonic breath tier. As he had killed a lot of people recently, he had prepared quite a number of these skeletons and kept them in his storage ring. Now was the time to put them to good use. He stood on top of the forest and carefully counted with his fingers. After that, he painstakingly selected several dozens of black pine trees from the surroundings, and moved the trees to some other spots in the forest, burying a large number of energy stones and formation discs in coordination with each other. With this, the foundation of the lower-grade illusory sky-bewildering formation recorded in the Scroll of Stealing was finally ready. Although it was a lower-grade illusory formation recorded in the Scroll of Stealing, and the grade of the formation was only 12 primordial stars, it could attract fiends from outer domains to hide in it. Not only could it confuse one's senses and mind, it could also attack one's soul and nascent divinity. Even a heaven immortal who had cultivated his nascent divinity would suffer a great loss if he was careless in this formation. This time, he rode on his flying sword and traveled nearly 20,000 miles in just one day and one night. Half a month later, he had gone nearly 400,000 miles into Meng Mountains, but he still could not see where the border of Meng Mountains was. In front of him was a vast expanse of water vapor. A huge river, 100 times wider than the myriad Red River, and unfathomably long, appeared right in front of Wuqi's eyes. He opened up a door about the size of an ordinary gate on top of a mountain rock, on which Wuqi carved 3 ancient characters, Dust Separation Residence. After that, he laboriously dug out 2 stone chambers, one at the front and the other at the back. In the front chamber, there was a stone table and a stone chair, on top of which were a few crude clay teapots. Wuqi also threw a few tea leaves that had been soaked in water into the teapots. After finishing all these, only then did Wuqi twist his body and drill down, going nearly 10,000 feet deep into the ground. He came almost directly to the top of the spirit cave, where he opened up a huge cave abode about 1,000 feet in both width and length. In this cave abode, he had used his strongest ability to deploy several dozens of formations that he could now control. Among them, there were not only illusory formations, but also various killing formations and trapping formations. After he finished deploying the teleportation formation outside, he used a small illusory formation to seal off the cave. Then, with the help of the teleportation formation, Wuqi returned to his first secret cave. Here, he left behind a batch of energy stones and life-saving spirit pills, as well as 2 spare storage rings. There were many things in the world that could not be predicted. As long as he made some preparations, he would have a greater chance of survival. When everything was ready, only then did Wuqi come to the core of the illusory sky-bewildering formation on the cliff. Carefully, he rode on his flying sword and thrust it into the cliff. A sword beam flashed, and a piece of cliff was hacked off by the sword beam. A stream of dense energy burst out from the cliff along with a sizzling sound. There was an earth vein spirit cave in the cliff, and the energy accumulated in the cliff had reached an extremely abnormal level. When the cliff was broken off, the highly concentrated energy immediately burst out from it. The sword of greedy wolf transformed into a dark sword beam that looked like a flood dragon and began to slash at the bottom of the cliff. Sticking close to the cliff, it carved out a small ditch that led straight to the lake in the valley. After that, Wuqi flew up to the top of the cliff, drew a small stream from several tens of miles away from the cliff, and asked it to divert its course to the top of the cliff. Tiny streams of water poured down from the top of the cliff along with the ancient pine and wisteria. Thousands of streams of water as thick as a piece of wood covered the entire cliff, twisting and turning along with the mountain breeze, causing the tiny bit of water vapor to disappear without a trace. Several hundred miles away from the valley, he found a remote cave and buried a formation disk there. As for the other formation disk, he planned to go to another cave abode and set it up. With this, he would have many different escape routes in G City, and in each secret cave abode, there would be a teleportation formation that was connected to the other cave abodes, allowing him to travel to the wilderness outside the cave abode through different teleportation formations. In this way, the secret and safety of Wuqi's cave abode could be ensured to the greatest extent. After that, Wuqi spent another half a month, focusing all his attention on traveling in a straight line towards the deeper region of Meng Mountains. With the profound knowledge of formations found in Scroll of Stealing, Wuqi was confident that even an expert who had formed his nascent divinity realm, if he did not know much about formations, would not be able to break through the restrictive spell in his cave abode within 10 days to half a month. In the center of the cave abode, Wuqi had placed 3 small-scale teleportation formation discs. One of them was connected to the 3 discs in G City, while the other 2 discs were placed in other places. Shockingly, one of the life-saving secret abodes of the shadowy figure was located inside the core of a huge star. With his current strength, Wuqi could forget about using such a shocking method. He was just trying his best to leave a few more ways out for himself. After stripping off the clothes of both corporeal bodies, Wuqi took out a huge amount of herbs. The streams of water poured down from the cliff, flowing through the small ditch and flowing into the lake in the valley. After being cleaned up by Wuqi with his skillful hands, everything looked as if it was made by the heavens, without any trace of artificial work. After pondering for a while, he found a few honeycombs of poisonous wild bees on the cliff, and hung them on a pine tree at the foot of the cliff. Ordinary mortals, even warriors of Xiantian realm, would avoid these troublesome things when they saw them. As for cultivators, they would never get entangled with these bugs that did not possess any sentience. Therefore, this place was much more hidden. Chapter 157. Slowly scanning through the bodies of Shi Tianma and his son with the spirit-searching and secret-probing palm incantation, Wuqi shook his head disdainfully. Both father and son had consumed an evil beast body pill to strengthen their physical strength. It was a mystic technique used by the evil cultivators to refine their demon beasts. There were countless evil cultivators under the heaven, and the formula of beast body pill was endless as well. They were extremely bizarre, evil, and unpredictable. Both father and son had the cultivation base of Xiantian realm, but their corporeal bodies were ridiculously strong, so strong that even Wuqi was amazed by them. However, the large clumps of dark green air coming out from their translucent bodies told Wuqi that the formula of the beast body pill they had consumed was extremely brilliant, and its medicinal strength was very powerful. However, as the evil cultivation technique cultivated by both father and son was not perfect, they could at most absorb 5% of the medicinal strength, and there was still 95% of the medicinal strength hidden in their bodies. If Wuqi could absorb all of the medicinal strength, his corporeal body would be strengthened to the state of indestructible body described in Scroll of Stealing. It was a magical body that could only be possessed by a cultivator who had attained the culmination of nascent soul realm. Furthermore, all the cultivation techniques cultivated in Scroll of Stealing had a very high requirement on the strength of one's corporeal body. The so-called indestructible body described in Scroll of Stealing was a few times stronger than the fleshly body of an ordinary nascent soul cultivator. If Wuqi could cultivate such a magical body, he would not have to fear anyone below the rank of Jin Dan. Even if an earth immortal of nascent soul realm encountered him and could not defeat his opponent in terms of magical techniques and divine abilities, he would have a higher chance of escaping after suffering a beating. Especially when he possessed a powerful corporeal body, he would be able to use those evil cultivation techniques found in Scroll of Stealing without any scruples, as he would not have to worry about the pressure that would cause his body to collapse. When Wu Qi thought of those few Jin Dan pills he found in the mine, he could not help but let out a big grin. After carefully observing the corporeal bodies of Shi Tianma and his son, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh and said, "It must have been tough for you to play dead until now with the mystic technique of feigning death and still retain a tiny bit of your energy. It is a pity that Wei Xiaoxiao couldn't save you and wake you up, and your patriarch, Lu Buwei, didn't come to save you as well. So, what a pity. We are enemies." Casually, Wu Qi pressed his palm onto the chest of Shi Tianma and his son, completely cutting off their life force. As soon as the life force in their bodies disappeared, their bodies suddenly trembled. Having lost control of their life force, the bodies of the father and son could not withstand the enormous power in their bodies, especially the pressure of the huge medicinal power. Their bodies were about to disintegrate into pieces. In the blink of an eye, Wu Qi waved his hand and a pool of clear spring water surged up from the ground, firmly wrapping the two of them inside. Then, he threw all kinds of spirit herbs he picked along the way when he opened up the secret palace into the water. The water spun at an incredible speed, and loud popping noises of explosion could be heard ringing out endlessly. Finally, the bodies of the father and son exploded into the tiniest blood mist. The clear spring water within the circumference of several tens of feet had been dyed into a frightening purple-green color, while a pungent smell of grass and wood soared up into the sky. The enormous medicinal power of the beast body core pill stored in their bodies was triggered, spreading out like a biochemical bomb. If an ordinary person were to smell this highly poisonous smell, they would die from bleeding from all 7 apertures, yet Wu Qi did not mind it at all. He opened his mouth and sprayed out a ball of flame, fusing it into the water. The temperature of the water rose rapidly, as the over 20,000 odd and bizarre spirit herbs, poisons, and all kinds of strange herbs that Wu Qi had added into the water were melted by the heat, injecting their medicinal power into the water. A great amount of medicinal dregs and fragments kept spraying out from the water, together with tiny pieces of minced meat and blood. These were the dregs and fragments of the corporeal bodies of Shi Tianma and his son. Without changing his expression, Wu Qi kept spraying out balls of flame to heat up the water in front of him. He murmured under his breath, "In your next life, don't ever practice this kind of evil magic again. Even if you possess a formidable strength, when your intelligence is completely devoured by the medicinal strength, you will turn into a demon beast in human form, a puppet that can be controlled by someone else. You will turn into a demon beast from the spirit of all living beings, and you should thank me for sending you into the transmigration. At least, you can have a new human body." After slowly purifying the enormous blood essence, energy essence, and the remaining medicinal strength from the bodies of the father and son, Wu Qi exercised a Taoist magic and sent all the medicinal dregs and fragments of blood and flesh out of the cave, sprinkling them far away into the huge river. The pungent smell of herbs could no longer be sensed from the cave, and was replaced by a very strong and fragrant aroma of spirit herbs. Using all kinds of poisonous herbs to fight poison with poison, Wu Qi had completely melted the overbearing and vicious medicinal strength of the beast body core pill. After that, he fused and digested all kinds of spirit herbs that could greatly replenish one's energy, turning the enormous medicinal strength contained in the beast body core pill into a medicine with a mild nature, gradually condensing and purifying it into one. Energies of 5 colors were rushing and rocking in the cave, as a great amount of natural energies were attracted by the innate energies of 5 elements in Wu Qi's body and kept rushing over, quickly merging into the clear water in front of him. Because of the attraction of the innate energies of 5 elements, a thread of innate energy drifting in the vicinity of the lofty mountain was separated from the acquired energies, turning into sparkling and translucent beams of 5 colors and quickly injecting into the water. The aroma in the cave became more and more fragrant, and gradually, it twisted and turned into a faint white mist, taking the shape of a dragon and a tiger, wheeling slowly around Wu Qi. This was the unique sign when a supreme-grade spirit herb was about to take its final form. Wu Qi could not help but let out a joyful laugh and said, "Lu Buwei, do you still have a disciple like this? The more the better, the more the better. How many spirit herbs did you use to concoct those beast body core pills? Now, they all belong to me." After letting out a few loud laughs, Wu Qi's fingers moved quickly, unleashing all 1080 hand incantations of the seal of minor universal star, shifting with all his strength. Bright gleams flickered in the water, as a great amount of natural energies kept being absorbed into the water. Gradually, the water in the circumference of several tens of feet had condensed into a ball of pale purple ointment, emitting a faint fragrance. The translucent ointment looked like it was carved out of crystal. It hovered in front of Wu Qi, emanating an indescribable life force. After carefully identifying the properties of the ointment, Wu Qi once again let out a loud laugh. There was still a certain amount of poison left in the ointment. After all, it was his first time using this mystic technique from Scroll of Stealing. Therefore, he could not completely purify the medicinal strength. However, this little bit of poison did not pose any threat to him. As long as the strength of his fleshly body was strong enough, this little bit of poison was like a few mouthfuls of salt to an ordinary man. It was painful, but not a serious problem. The glistening ointment was about 10 feet in circumference. Without saying anything, Wu Qi took off all his clothes, clenched his jaws tightly and jumped into the ointment. It took Wu Qi 1 whole month to concoct this ointment. He had no idea how much true samadhi flame he had spat out, therefore, the temperature of this ointment was comparable to a piece of red-hot iron. Right when Wu Qi dived into the ointment, a sizzling sound was immediately heard, as if a piece of red-hot iron plate was burning the skin of a wild boar. A large sheet of white smoke was seen rising from Wu Qi's body. His skin was burned to pieces, and countless blisters were popping up on his skin. Wu Qi let out a miserable howl, closed his eyes, and cried out with a stern voice, "Only by going through the bitterness can one become a man above all others. The body-forging divine ability of great and great heavens." Both of his palms formed into a half-opened lotus incantation gesture and changed quickly, bringing up streams of bright light as they quickly pointed at all the important acupoints on his body. Wherever the hand incantation gesture passed through, Wu Qi's body would explode, and numerous thumb-sized holes would be opened up on those important acupoints. Like a flood that had just broken a dam, the boiling hot ointment flowed into Wu Qi's body through these holes, transforming into an endless and violent energy that swept across his entire body. Sitting cross-legged in the ointment, Wu Qi formed a lotus incantation gesture with both palms and quickly patted on his body. His body was trembling violently, and every inch of his skin was flowing like water. Noises of his muscles, meridians, bones, and internal organs kept coming out from his body, and at the same time, noises of his body healing that sounded like a silkworm eating mulberry leaves kept coming out from his body. Wu Qi was howling and howling with pain, but he ignored it and focused on exercising the body-forging divine ability of great and great heavens, a secret technique from Scroll of Stealing. Again and again, his body was shattered, and then regenerated. It was like a steel that had been tempered hundreds of times. Every time his body was shattered and regenerated, Wu Qi's fleshly body would be strengthened by 30%. The innate energy in his body was like a tidal wave, mixing with the enormous medicinal strength that kept flowing into his body. Wherever it went, all the meridians would be shattered, regenerated, expanded, strengthened, and then shattered again, regenerated again, expanded again, and strengthened again. All the organs in his body were repeating the same process. Wu Qi had completely forgotten the pain. He was crying and yelling, cursing all the holy immortals and Buddhas in the world, using the dirtiest and most vicious slang to greet all the people who had a conflict with him in his memory. If the heaven had a spirit and heard Wu Qi's vicious curses, it would have sent down 999 thunder tribulations to shatter him. The 10 feet wide ointment kept seeping into Wu Qi's body, turning into an enormous amount of energy that could replenish the functions of his corporeal body. As the days went by, Wu Qi's body grew stronger and stronger, and the amount of ointment on his body grew smaller and smaller. When the ointment was reduced to a thin layer that clung tightly to his skin, 3 months had passed, and Wuqi did not let out any more cries. His hands kept changing incantation gestures, and the ointment quickly merged with his body. The natural energies in the outside world had transformed into a cocoon that looked like a corporeal cocoon, wrapping around his body. At last, along with a faint rumble of thunder, Wuqi tore open the cocoon formed by the natural energies in the outside world with a punch, and slowly landed on the ground. His skin was sparkling and translucent, as if it was carved out of a beautiful sculpture, and was glinting with a faint luster. His streamlined muscles looked soft and harmonious, bringing with them an aura of nature that faintly harmonized with the heaven and earth. Conveniently, Wuqi took out an upper-grade magical flying sword and hacked it forcefully onto his body. His skin did not move at all, but the flying sword produced a large amount of sparks, and a large crack was left on the flying sword. The body of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm could not be harmed by magical items, and only magical treasures could harm the body of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Wuqi took a deep breath, and his body trembled slightly, causing the entire mountain to tremble. The body of a nascent soul. After using the mystic technique found in Scroll of Stealing, my body is much stronger than that of an ordinary earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Unless I am hit by a magical treasure controlled by an earth immortal, no one under the realm of nascent soul can harm me. However, being attacked by several hundred Jin Dan human immortals is a completely different matter. After checking his own condition, Wuqi pondered for a brief moment, then took out a Jin Dan he plundered, opened his mouth and swallowed it. The Jin Dan exploded in his abdomen, and an enormous core energy rolled and surged into all his meridians. If it were in the past, Wuqi's meridians would have been ripped to shreds by the enormous core energy contained in a complete Jin Dan. But now, it was like a small stream flowing into a dried-up river bed. He did not feel anything, and the core energy just flowed through his meridians and flowed through his entire body. 10 false cores quickly absorbed the enormous core energy. Gradually, the color of the Jin Dan turned brighter, and the misty core gradually solidified. Gradually, it transformed from the misty state to the state of flowing water. 3 days later, Wuqi swallowed another Jin Dan. Just like that, 21 days had passed. Suddenly, Wuqi opened his eyes, which shone with a dazzling gleam. Chapter 158. It was too harsh. After absorbing a few Jin Dan, Wuqi used his divine sense to check the condition of his body. He could not help but sigh. Although the Scroll of Stealing was magical, it was too harsh. Even with so many Jin Dan, it could only solidify the 10 false cores a little bit. By actually absorbing these plundered Jin Dan, Wuqi realized that the Scroll of Stealing could only extract the purest thread of core energy from these Jin Dan, which was the thread of innate nectar produced after the Jin Dan merged with the soul and merged it into the false cores. The rest of the energy that made up the Jin Dan was completely abandoned. Based on this calculation, if Wuqi could attain mastery in all 10 false cores, the density of these 10 innate Jin Dan would be at least 1,000 times greater than that of ordinary cultivators, and the power of the energies that could be unleashed would also be at least 1,000 times greater. This is too harsh. If I cultivate like this, how long will it take for me to cultivate them to mastery? No wonder without the help of external objects, it is basically impossible for me to cultivate Scroll of Stealing on my own. External objects, a lot of Jin Dan, a lot of energy stones, a lot of spirit herbs, and a lot of natural essence, only then can I have a great improvement in my cultivation base. Wuqi sighed with emotion, then transformed all the impure and useless energies in these Jin Dan into acquired energies of 5 elements, which were cultivated using the Qi circulating technique of 5 elements, the foundation technique of heaven-breaking sword sect. These plundered Jin Dan had absorbed all acquired energies, and only after the painstaking cultivation of the Jin Dan as a human immortal, did they condense into a thread of innate nectar in the Jin Dan. These innate nectar were absorbed by Wuqi's false cores and solidified. As for the remaining 99% of the energies, only a very small amount of pure energies were transformed into innate energies of 5 elements, while the rest were transformed into acquired energies of 5 elements, rushing ceaselessly through the main meridians in his body. Apart from the pure and powerful innate energy contained in the 7 stealing heaven meridians in Wuqi's arms, he had also obtained a few Jin Dan's enormous energy and innate energy. His cultivation of the qi circulating technique of 5 elements had reached the limit of the innate realm. Because of his extremely strong fleshly body, the innate energy in his body had been compressed and condensed into a half-liquid and half-solid state, which was a few times denser than mercury. What was even more frightening was that Wuqi's meridians were now extremely wide, and the capacity of his meridians was enormous, at least 10 times larger than Shi Tianma's. Therefore, the total amount of spiritual qi in his body was shockingly huge. As long as he wanted to, he could condense the heaven-splitting sword elixir at any time according to the mental cultivation method of the 5 elements sword technique of the heaven-splitting swordsmanship sect. However, Wuqi did not care about the sky-splitting sword core condensed from the 5 elements sword technique. If he could obtain the unity of sword energy script, the greatest mystic technique of heaven-breaking sword sect, he would be able to condense a sword core that contained all 5 elements, and it would be able to resonate with the innate energy of 5 elements in Wuqi's 7 stealing heaven meridians. This was what Wuqi really wanted. Therefore, the matter of condensing the sword core could be postponed for a few days, and he would have to wait and see how he could obtain the unity of sword energy script. He rose to his feet and tidied up the messy secret cave, then carefully activated all the restrictive spells and formations in the cave. Only then did he step onto a teleportation formation disc and teleport himself out of the cave. Over 300 miles away, at the bank of the nameless river, in a water cave under a reef, a large sheet of white glowing patterns surged up from the sand. Abruptly, Wuqi's body came out from the glowing patterns. Holding his breath, he swam along a narrow waterway for over 100 feet, driving away a few river crabs that were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, trying to attack him. Then, Wuqi poked his head out from the raging river, leaped up into the air and landed on the bank. He spat out a few mouthfuls of water, pulled a bold river crab from his lapel, about 1 foot in circumference, and threw it into the river. After that, Wuqi threw his head back and let out a few loud laughs. His laughter was loud and sonorous, and there was a vague sound of metal clashing coming out from his mouth. It was like the ringing of a great bell, spreading out for dozens of miles. Together with the surging waves of the river in front of him, Wuqi felt as if he was going to reopen the world. Due to the great improvement of his fleshly body, the functions of Wuqi's 5 internal organs, including his heart, spleen, liver, kidneys, and lungs, had all been greatly enhanced. Under the stimulation of the qi circulating technique of 5 elements, 5 colored natural energies were bursting out from his 5 internal organs, merging into his meridians and making his laughter sound louder and louder. It even shook the several miles wide river in front of him, causing the waves to surge and rise into the sky. Now that the secret cave was completed, it was more than enough for him to advance or retreat in this world. The tempering of his fleshly body was now comparable to an earth immortal of nascent soul realm, or even a few times stronger than them. It had laid a solid foundation for his future cultivation. Of all the spirit items of 5 elements, the innate energies of 5 elements had been fully replenished. On top of that, he now had the sword of greedy wolf, the silver lotus, the grand white spatial breaching pearl of innate energies, all of which were supreme-grade treasures, and a rare soul replacement puppet in his dantian. With that, Wuqi truly felt that he could travel freely under this vast heaven. Ever since he arrived in this world, a heavy dark cloud that had been pressing down on his heart had gradually vanished. The meridians in Wuqi's body were now unobstructed, and his spiritual ocean was crystal clear. While he was laughing, he was breathing in the natural energies, faintly harmonizing with the surrounding wind and clouds. His divine sense was gradually harmonizing with the Tao of heaven and earth. That was why he could laugh so joyfully, and it actually brought about a change in the water flow of the river. While he was laughing happily, all of a sudden, Wuqi heard a deep, muffled sound of wind breaking coming from his back. Hastily, Wu Qi spun and spat out 2 lower-grade flying swords. One of them was wielded with the azure water sword technique, while the other was wielded with the mountain crumbling sword technique. They transformed into a sword beam enshrouded by water ripples, and a sword beam enshrouded by countless thumb-sized, yellow-colored clumps of soil, protecting him. Meanwhile, the sword of Greedy Wolf was poised in his arm, ready to be unleashed at any moment if something went wrong. Apart from the sword of Greedy Wolf, the silver lotus was also faintly visible between his brows. After the preliminary refinement by Wu Qi, all 360 grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies were now embedded in the pistil of the silver lotus like lotus seeds, ready to strike at any moment. Even the few defensive magical treasures of lower-grade magical treasures, which he obtained from killing all the Jin Dan human immortals and Taoists of Xiantian realm under Wei Xiaoxiao's command, had been prepared. At this moment, Wu Qi was like a venomous snake that had coiled up its body, ready to strike a deadly strike at any moment. However, he had instinctively exercised the mystic art of aura concealing found in Scroll of Stealing, hiding his aura without releasing it. With that, he still looked like a small potato of respiration tier of Xiantian realm, inconspicuous. Who could tell that this guy was actually a Tyrannosaurus that disguised as a little rabbit? Riding on a beam of light and approaching Wu Qi from behind, a middle-aged man was seen. He was clad in a strange earthy yellow long robe, his hair disheveled. He was standing on a huge jade slab the size of a door, engraved with countless runes. Vaguely, the surrounding wind and clouds were stirred up, and from time to time, energies of 4 colors, earth, water, fire, and wind, would burst out from the jade slab. The man had a skinny face, and his body was as thin as a bamboo pole. A strong gust of wind was blowing from the surface of the river, rolling up his sleeves and making them flutter in the wind, as if a gust of wind could blow him far away. Stepping on the huge jade slab, which measured 30 feet in length, 3 feet in width, and 1 foot in thickness, the middle-aged man looked down at Wu Qi condescendingly. With a flustered and exasperated expression, he breathed out a heavy breath and said, Are you Wu Qi? Great Yan Dynasty, Marquis Tianyun, Wu Qi. The number 1 lackey of Duke Yanlu, Yan Qingfeng? Looking at this middle-aged man with a cultivation base of Middle Jin Dan realm in astonishment, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh and said, Wu Qi, am your master, Marquis Tianyun. But, what lackey? It doesn't sound nice. Can you please not use these 2 words? No matter what, your master is the chief hanger-on of Duke Qingfeng. He is a hanger-on, a brother, not a lackey, do you understand? Come, call me master and let me have a good time. The middle-aged man had been hurling insults at Wu Qi the moment they met. Therefore, Wu Qi was too lazy to have a proper conversation with him. Instead, he just pestered him with some nonsense words. The middle-aged man let out a hideous laugh, nodded his head and said, You are Wu Qi, that's it. It's him, that's it. Taking a deep breath, the middle-aged man roared hysterically, You bastard. Do you know how long we've been searching for you? Can't you just stay quietly in one place and let us find you and kill you? Why are you running all over the mountains and plains? Wu Qi stared blankly at the man. After a long while, when the man had finished spitting, only then did Wu Qi cry out in shock, What did you just say? Taking a deep breath and wiping off the spittle from the corner of his mouth, the man sneered and said, The 5 of us have been following you all the way from Ji City to Lu Kingdom, from Lu Kingdom to Meng Village, from Meng Village to Meng Mountains, all for the sake of killing you. But, you're too lucky. Every time, you were either accompanied by someone, or you were hiding in a crowded place, making it difficult for us to kill you. We waited until you entered Meng Mountains. The man's face twitched a few times, then he stared at Wu Qi with a bitter expression, sighed pitifully and said, After you entered Meng Mountains, even eldest senior brother's heavenly star positioning disc could not track your exact location. He could only roughly calculate your location. We've been following you for a few months, in this barren mountain and wilderness. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva, then said angrily, In this barren mountain, we've been eating and sleeping in the open for a few months. We didn't even prepare a change of clothes. No food, no water, no beauties to serve us, no disciples to listen to our orders. We had to do everything by ourselves, and we even had to chase after you. What kind of days have we been living these past few months? With a wave of his hand, he threw a talisman into the sky. A strong blue beam shot up into the sky, then exploded violently, transforming into countless blue specks of light that spread out and formed a huge talisman that measured tens of miles in circumference. Rumbling noises of explosions rang out as the blue specks of light exploded one after another, forming into a huge talisman in the air that looked like a real entity. In the middle of the talisman were 3 faintly discernible characters: Heavenly Spirit Sect. Among the 13 immortal sects of Great Yen Dynasty, Heavenly Spirit Sect was a sect that specialized in the study of talismans and restrictive spells. All offensive and auxiliary talismans of Great Yen Dynasty were produced by Heavenly Spirit Sect, and cultivators from Heavenly Spirit Sect were involved in the construction of defensive formations for all cities and mansions. Heavenly Spirit Sect was the one who was responsible for the production of all the lethal weapons in Great Yen Dynasty, as well as the parts that needed to be engraved with runes and defensive mechanisms. It was a sect that was extremely wealthy, and had nearly fused with the official of Great Yen Dynasty. It had a close relationship with many influential figures. Compared to the poor heaven-breaking sword sect, any disciple of Heavenly Spirit Sect was like a wealthy man. Senior, may I ask if Wu Qi has offended Heavenly Spirit Sect? Wu Qi stared at the middle-aged man standing on the jade slab with a puzzled expression. Suddenly, a furious roar was heard coming from a distance. Not only that, he has also greatly offended us, Heavenly Spirit Sect. 4 strong beams shot out from 4 directions. They were 4 jade slabs of different shapes and colors, with a yellow-robed cultivator standing on each of them. 5 Jin Dan cultivators from Heavenly Spirit Sect who were hunting Wu Qi had gathered here. Among them, the strongest cultivator was actually a cultivator who had attained the mastery stage of Jin Dan, and was on the verge of breaking through the realm of nascent soul. From dozens of miles away, he had unleashed a tremendous pressure that felt like a hurricane, pressing towards Wu Qi from afar. Chapter 159. About 100 miles away from the riverside where Wu Qi and his men were hiding, there was a small village surrounded by a few small hills. Blood was everywhere, and dead bodies were scattered all over the village. The buildings in the village were set ablaze by a great fire, and the dead bodies were scorched by the raging flame, emitting a pungent, burnt smell that spread in all directions. Some broken and damaged weapons were scattered messily on the ground. Obviously, they were destroyed by a very strong external force. Nearly 30 elite warriors, clad in black soft leather armors without helmets and carrying long blades in their hands, were roaming slowly in the village. They kept searching for the remaining barbarians from piles of firewood, rice jars, wells, and other hidden places, then chopping them into 2. There were also some warriors going in and out of the houses that were not on fire, transporting some energy stones and metal ores they found to the outskirts of the village. On a small piece of flat land at the entrance of the village, several thousand pieces of energy stones and various metal ores that had not been polished yet were piled up. A few dozen burly warriors clad in heavy armors were escorting a burly man, who was clad in a pale blood-red armor and carried a heavy tiger-headed spear. He was counting the treasures one by one. It took the burly man a full 15 minutes to count all the energy stones, and he could not help but scratch his head in annoyance. The number is still not enough. Including the ones we found a few days ago, we have less than 500 upper-grade energy stones. Our mission is 1,000 upper-grade energy stones and 30 supreme-grade energy stones. Let's go and see if there are any barbarian villages nearby. After shoving all the energy stones and metal ores into the storage bag tied around his waist, the burly man grumbled in a low, muffled voice, "If we are the slowest in completing the mission, the 100 strokes of the stick will not feel good, and my buttocks will blossom." Before his voice could fade away, a beam of blue light suddenly shot up into the sky from a distant horizon. Accompanied by a series of explosions that sounded like muffled thunder, a huge rune that measured several tens of miles in circumference hovered in the air for a full 10 minutes, before it gradually turned into tiny fireflies that drifted across the sky. The burly man and all his subordinates raised their heads abruptly, and their pupils shrunk to the size of needle tips. Heavenly Spirit Sect. Does that mean we have bumped into some living people? The burly man licked his lips, casually pointed at a few of his subordinates clad in soft armors, and said, "Go, report the situation here. The rest of you, follow me. Let's find out who these stupid fellows are." Hee hee, aren't they afraid of attracting ghosts by releasing such a large-scale summoning talisman in a place like this? Military orders must be obeyed. Immediately, a few elite warriors stepped onto a specially made, 3 feet long, oval-shaped magical item that looked like a skateboard, with 2 wings on both sides. Along with a swishing sound, they flew thousands of feet above the ground and into the distance. The burly man immediately threw out the tiger-head wind-splitter spear, which transformed into a bloody streak of light that covered his entire body, and flew towards the direction of the blue light. The other heavy-armored warriors flew up one after another, while the remaining dozens of soft-armored warriors stepped onto the wing-shaped magic artifacts and followed closely behind them. Wu Qi's body kept swaying under the tremendous pressure, like a weed in a stormy sea, as if it would be completely destroyed at any time. Narrowing his eyes, he fixed his gaze on the 4 cultivators who were rushing at him from all directions and cried out in a stern voice, "Are all of you seniors from Heavenly Spirit Sect? Why are you following Wu Qi to this place?" The surrounding void was trembling faintly, while the natural energies of earth, water, fire, and wind were vibrating abnormally. Riding on a strong wind, 4 yellow-robed cultivators came shooting over. In just a blink of an eye, they had formed a small 5 elements formation around Wu Qi. Together with the middle-aged man who came first, they had surrounded Wu Qi in a space that measured 1,000 feet in circumference. The jade slabs underneath their feet emitted a blinding light, attracting the natural energies of 5 elements in the surrounding natural energies, turning them into powerful shackles of 5 elements that locked down the flow of natural energies in this place. Once Jin Dan and below were sealed by this minor 5 elements energy sealing formation, not only would they be unable to absorb any natural energies from the outside world, even the circulation of their innate energies would be greatly slowed down. If an ordinary Xiantian Taoist was trapped in this formation, perhaps they would not be able to use even a tiny bit of innate energy, and would be at the mercy of these cultivators. Wu Qi's body trembled. 2 lower-grade flying swords fell to the ground abruptly, and he slumped weakly to the ground. He threw his head back and cried out, "Killing without teaching is torture. Seniors, you can kill Wu Qi, but you must let Wu Qi die knowing the reason behind his death." Who did Wu Qi offend? Who did he offend? Even if I have to die, I want to die in peace. Among the 4 yellow-robed cultivators who came later, the old man with the highest cultivation base, a cultivator who had attained the mastery stage of Jin Dan, was obviously their leader. The old man, who had a pair of extremely rare double pupils that shone with a green gleam in his eyes, said coldly, "I am Ling Wujiu from Heavenly Spirit Sect, the elder of Heavenly Spirit Sect." Little Wu Qi, do you really not know the reason why you deserve to die? Wu Qi lay on the ground, his body twitching and looking at Ling Wujiu pitifully. He breathed out a long sigh and said, "Junior, I really don't know." Ling Wujiu glared at Wu Qi, his body shivering with anger. After a long while, he roared furiously, "If not because you were a busybody and ruined Wei merchant, why would we condescend to hunt down a Xiantian junior like you? Do you know that after Wei merchant was confiscated, Heavenly Spirit Sect's annual income dropped by 70%? Do you know that because 13 of our sect's elders were involved in the case of Wei merchant, they were executed by His Majesty's imperial decree?" Hiss. Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath. Heavenly Spirit Sect had a secret cooperation with Wei merchant, so it was reasonable for them to secretly produce some powerful talismans and provide them to Wei merchant. But, this secret income accounted for 70% of Heavenly Spirit Sect's total income? This was a huge enmity. Especially this time, Yan Dan had actually ordered the execution of 13 sect elders of Heavenly Spirit Sect. That was 13 human immortals of Jin Dan Sect. No wonder Heavenly Spirit Sect had sent out 5 human immortals of Jin Dan Sect to hunt him down for a few months. If not because of the various defensive formations and defensive mechanisms that concealed his aura from time to time while Wuqi was constructing his cave abodes, disrupting the aura around him, these few men would have long found Wuqi. How many human immortals of Jin Dan sect could there be in a sect? Yen Dan had ordered the execution of 13 human immortals of Heavenly Spirit sect. This was a blood feud. Since Heavenly Spirit sect could not do anything to Yen Dan, they could only vent their anger on Wuqi. 5 human immortals of Jin Dan sect were determined to kill Wuqi. After all, in the official propaganda of Great Yen Dynasty, it was stated that Wuqi was the greatest contributor in wiping out Wei Merchant, and he was the one who found out all the details. Smiling bitterly, Wuqi looked at Ling Wujiu, sighed and said, "Elder Ling, would you believe me if I told you that I have no idea how His Majesty investigates the case?" Ling Wujiu shook his head and said, "It doesn't matter whether you believe me or not. The most important thing is to give an explanation to the entire Heavenly Spirit sect. If you stayed in Ji City, we couldn't do anything to you. But, since you've come here, and entered deep into the barren mountain alone, don't blame us for being cruel." He waved his hand, and a 2 feet and 4 inches long light purple talisman appeared in his palm. As he was about to unleash the talisman, Wuqi suddenly screamed, "Wait! I have one more question. How did you track me down?" "We used a teleportation formation to leave Ji City and come to the Lu Kingdom. Even if you have a mystic technique to track us, the distance between us is too far. How could you find me so easily?" After a brief moment of pondering, Ling Wujiu nodded his head and said, "I'll let you die knowing the truth. The teleportation formation from Ji City to the Lu Kingdom is not only constructed by Great Yen Dynasty. Not long after you arrived at the Lu Kingdom, we arrived as well. As long as the distance between us is no more than 30,000 miles, our sect's most precious treasure, the Heavenly Star Positioning Disc, will be able to determine your position. There is no way you can escape from us." After a brief moment of pondering, Wuqi shook his head in shock. Apart from the teleportation formation system constructed by Great Yen Dynasty, there was another teleportation formation in Ji City? It could also teleport from Ji City to the Lu Kingdom? Who was the one who constructed this teleportation formation? Wei Merchant? That was possible, but not very likely. Then, who could it be? Could it be that Yen Dan had not cleaned up the internal affairs of Great Yen Dynasty? After a brief moment of silence, Wuqi asked timidly, "Who constructed this teleportation formation? If you want to kill me, then let me die knowing the truth." Ling Wujiu opened his mouth and was about to answer Wuqi's question, but suddenly, he laughed coldly. He glared at Wuqi and roared, "Little brat, are you trying to get information from me? Don't even think about it. Do you think I'm someone who can be fooled so easily? Damn it, you can die now." With a shake of his wrist, a large sheet of flame burst out from the light purple talisman in his palm, transforming into a purple-red fire dragon and thrusting towards Wuqi. Wuqi recognized the talisman. It was the 39 Celestial Flaming Dragon Talisman, a very powerful talisman among all the offensive talismans sold by Heavenly Spirit sect. The most powerful talisman was the 39 Celestial Flaming Dragon Talisman, which was equivalent to 80% of the full force strike of an early-stage Jin Dan human immortal. It was a very powerful talisman. In the black market of 4 Seas, the price of this talisman had reached an astonishing 100,000 gold coins, and it was a priceless talisman. A high temperature that could melt rocks came blowing at Wuqi's face, while a long and drawn-out dragon roar shook Wuqi's ears and made him feel a faint pain. The several tens of feet long fiery dragon came whistling down from the sky. Suddenly, Wuqi's body flickered and flew over 1,000 feet away, landing not far behind the middle-aged man from Heavenly Spirit sect who appeared first. A loud boom rang out, as the fiery dragon blasted out a large pit, 1,000 feet deep and over 100 feet in circumference. All the rocks and sand in the pit had turned into scorching lava. Because of the powerful explosion, the crimson lava splashed up into the sky, turning into countless fireballs the size of bowls and shooting in all directions. The spot where Wuqi stood was now filled with smoke and fire, dirt and rocks flying in all directions. It was impossible to see where Wu Qi's body was. Ling Wujiu also did not see the sudden change just now. Is he dead? He asked hesitantly. While hiding behind the middle-aged man, Wu Qi's eyes turned cold. A five-colored gleam shot out from his eyes, as he opened his mouth and spat out the sword of greedy wolf. It transformed into a 10-feet-long sword beam, enshrouded in tiny wisps of flame, and shot whistling out. The sky-burning sword technique of heaven-breaking sword sect's 5 elements sword technique allowed the sword beam to transform into a flame, which allowed the cultivator to use the samadhi true flame in his body to ignite the natural flame in the outside world and burn everything in the world. When cultivated to the highest realm, the cultivator could truly unleash a frightening power that could incinerate the heaven and earth. The middle-aged man standing on the jade board did not realize that Wu Qi might be able to escape. How could a mere Xiantian cultivator whose innate energy was sealed by the minor energy sealing formation of 5 elements and the flaming dragon talisman still have a chance to escape? Accompanied by a shrill wolf howl, the sword of greedy wolf pierced through the middle-aged man's back, spraying out a large amount of burning blood. The severely wounded middle-aged man let out a miserable howl. He turned his head abruptly, glared at Wu Qi with his eyes wide open, and roared, "Senior brothers, be careful. There is something strange about this kid." All the blood essence in his body shot out from his mouth, turning into a blood arrow and falling onto the jade board underneath his feet. Abruptly, a blinding light burst out from the 30-feet-long jade board. Accompanied by a deafening thunderclap, it soared up into the sky like a door plank, pressing down viciously towards Wu Qi's head. Chapter 160. The name of the jade tablet under the middle-aged man's feet was Greenshadow Wind-Slaughtering Talisman, a natal talisman treasure crafted by Elder Jean Dan of Heavenly Spirit sect with a mystic technique. It had consumed a great amount of rare natural materials, and was forged with his own blood essence and soul, becoming the strongest and only magical item owned by Heavenly Spirit sect's Jean Dan Talisman Master. Among the 5 elements, the Greenshadow Wind-Slaughtering Talisman had the element of green wood. It could draw out the most violent wind between the heaven and earth, turning it into countless wind blades that could kill people. For example, when a natal talisman treasure crafted by a talisman master who had cultivated to the realm of gold immortal, it could transform the wind blades into dimensional blades, using them to kill the enemies through the cracks in space. It was a very frightening power, and almost invincible. The only weakness of a talisman treasure was that it needed to be controlled by a talisman master at all times. Only then could it have the power to attack and defend the enemies. Once the talisman master's attention was not on the talisman treasure, it would become an inanimate object, no different than an ordinary stone or wooden stake. That was the reason why the sword pierced through the middle-aged man's body after he let his guard down. The deadly strike from Wu Qi had taken away all the life force in the middle-aged man's body. Scorching flames kept bursting out from his body, and in just a blink of an eye, his body was burned into ashes. A clear cry rang out from the sword of greedy wolf, as the Jean Dan in his dantian flew out and was held in Wu Qi's hand. However, the green shadow wind-killing talisman underneath his feet had been activated by all his blood essence. It had transformed into a huge glint of wind, glinting brilliantly with green light. A huge wind dragon, several miles tall and over 100 feet in circumference, was thrust towards Wu Qi with an ear-splitting noise. Caught unawares, Wu Qi was dragged into the wind dragon. He stood firmly on the ground, using his innate earth energy to draw the earth energies under his feet and pour them into his body, making Wu Qi's body heavier than a small hill. He even performed the spell of 3 mountains of earth, with his left hand, increasing the gravity by 3 times. No matter how the wind dragon was crazily tearing around him, his body remained motionless amidst the strong wind. Tens of thousands of palm-sized wind blades, which were glistening with a green light, pounced at Wu Qi's face. They circled around Wu Qi's body and slashed at him, ripping his clothes into rags. The wind blades kept hitting Wu Qi's skin, which was as fair as the finest jade. However, even though these wind blades were several dozens of times tougher and sharper than a steel blade tempered 100 times, they could only produce countless sparks and sparks on his skin, and failed to leave even the tiniest scratch on his skin. The indestructible body was a few times stronger than the Dharma body of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. Unless an earth immortal of nascent soul realm attacked with a magical treasure, or several hundred human immortals of Jin Dan attacked with magical treasures at the same time, nothing could hurt him. Wu Qi let the countless wind blades hack and slash at him. He just sneered and released a trace of his divine sense. His right hand kept changing the spirit-searching and secret probing hand gesture, carefully probing the secret of the green shadow wind-killing talisman in the eye of the wind. Under Wu Qi's probing, everything about the green shadow wind-kill talisman was completely exposed to him. The materials used, the combination of runes in the talisman, the direction of the formation and the flow of the energy, none of them could keep any secrets from him. In just the time to finish a pot of tea, Wu Qi had learned all the secrets of the green shadow wind-killing talisman, one of the 5 elements talisman treasures of Heavenly Spirit sect. As long as he was given enough materials, he could duplicate the green shadow wind-killing talisman exactly. However, the current Wu Qi did not have to spend a huge amount of precious materials to duplicate a talisman treasure. He opened his mouth and spat out a golden coin, then spat out a mouthful of energy onto the coin. After that, he recited an incantation and casually threw the coin into the air. Abruptly, the coin expanded to the size of a water jar. The eye of the coin flickered and kept shooting out large sheets of bright gleams. The green shadow wind-killing talisman hovering in the center of the wind dragon trembled, and its green glow was shattered into pieces. It transformed into a huge jade board and fell heavily from the sky. This coin, which was taken from Wei Xiaoxiao, had the power to obtain all kinds of flying swords and magical treasures. Wu Qi gave it a try today, and sure enough, it had an incredible effect. He grabbed the huge talisman treasure with one hand and kept injecting innate energies of 5 elements into it. In just a blink of an eye, the blood essence and divine sense that the middle-aged man had injected into the talisman treasure before he died was expelled, and the talisman treasure was now under Wu Qi's control. However, before he started cultivating the mystic technique of Heavenly Spirit sect, although he owned this talisman treasure, Wu Qi could not make full use of it. Therefore, he could only keep it in his storage ring. Even if he could not control and use it, this talisman treasure was still the combination of several tens of thousands of kilograms of precious materials. It was worth it to break it down and retrieve the materials. As the inheritor of Scroll of Stealing, of course, Wu Qi would never give up on a treasure like this. The wind dragon disintegrated abruptly, and his clothes were torn to shreds by the wind blades. A naked Wu Qi appeared before Ling Wujiu and the others. Ling Wujiu stared at Wu Qi with fear and roared at the top of his voice, "Kid, what did you do to junior brother Haoying?" Junior brother Haoying? Wu Qi narrowed his eyes. They were from Haoying's clan. No wonder they were so excited to chase after him together with Ling Wujiu. Not only had he ruined a great deal of business for Heavenly Spirit sect, Yan Dan had also offended quite a number of influential clans in Ji City. Haoying's clan was one of them, and the other 3 yellow-robed cultivators standing next to Ling Wujiu had a ferocious gleam in their eyes. Judging from their looks, they were also members of influential clans. Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh. He was too lazy to explain anything to Ling Wujiu. Abruptly, he tore apart the air and sped towards them. An ear-splitting noise of wind breaking was heard. With a flip of his palm, Wu Qi threw out a glinting gold ingot, which abruptly transformed into a gold ingot that measured several tens of feet in circumference and smashed down towards Ling Wujiu's head. This gold ingot was Wei Xiaoxiao's magical treasure. With its weight of several tens of thousands of kilograms, just by smashing someone with its own weight, it could make a human immortal Jin Dan suffer a great loss. On top of that, Wu Qi had injected a thread of innate gold energy into the gold ingot, allowing it to absorb a huge amount of gold element energies and fuse it into its own body. As a result, the power of this gold ingot was now a few times stronger than when it was in Wei Xiaoxiao's hand. It could exert a force of approximately 500,000 kilograms. Ling Wujiu had witnessed the tragic death of his junior brother, and even his talisman treasure was seized by Wu Qi. He had become vigilant. Right after the gold ingot was smashed, he gave a loud cry, and the jade slab underneath his feet suddenly emitted a large sheet of yellow light. One after another, the yellow light connected to the ground, absorbing the powerful earth element energies and kept injecting them into the talisman treasure. The name of this talisman treasure of Ling Wujiu was Yellow Element Mountain Suppressing Talisman. It was an earth element talisman treasure, capable of communicating with the earth, driving the mountains, and shifting the energy veins. It was an extremely powerful talisman treasure. Especially, as a cultivator of Jin Dan who had attained the Mahayana realm, after several hundred years of laborious cultivation, this talisman treasure had been refined several dozens of times by him, and had been upgraded several dozens of times. Its power had grown from an upper-tier magical item to a middle-tier magical item. The earth element energies kept injecting into the talisman treasure, forming into a small yellow hill that stood over 100 feet tall and 1,000 feet in circumference above Ling Wujiu's head. Layers upon layers of yellow earth element energies kept bursting out from the small hill, transforming into one after another powerful hurricane that greeted the gold ingot that was pressing down from above. Clang! A loud ringing of metal rang out, as the gold ingot was knocked back several thousand feet high. Wu Qi's heart trembled, and his divine sense was shaken. Immediately, a mouthful of blood surged up to his throat. It was true that his body had reached the level of indestructible body, and the magical item controlled by a human immortal like Jin Dan could not cause any harm to his body. However, his divine sense was shaken, and his corporeal body could not effectively protect it. The thread of divine sense contained in the gold ingot was nearly destroyed by the small yellow hill. Wu Qi's divine sense was shaken, and he nearly fell to the ground. The gold ingot returned to his palm with a sad wail. Then, Wu Qi threw out the gold ingot, which he had just rendered a great merit. This time, he exerted all his strength to drive the gold ingot, turning it into a golden coin that measured several tens of feet in circumference. A bright beam of light that stretched several tens of feet long shot out from the eye of the coin, bringing with it a swift and fierce aura as it thrust towards the yellow element mountain suppressing talisman. There was a huge difference in power between a talisman treasure that had been activated and one that had not. Just now, when junior brother Haoying was killed by Wu Qi, it was because his talisman treasure had not been activated yet. But now, Ling Wujiu was using all his strength to drive his talisman treasure. His entire body was shrouded in an extremely dense Earth Empress energy. The bright beam of light emitted from the gold ingot spun 36 times on the talisman treasure, making it shine brightly and produce loud clanging noises. However, it could only make the talisman treasure sway, and no matter how hard it tried, it could not make its energy scatter to the ground. Ling Wujiu's face had turned pale with fear. His body swayed on the talisman treasure as he roared furiously, "Are all of you dead men? All of you are shouting that you want to follow me out to kill this little brat. But what are you doing standing there in a daze? Are you going to collect my dead body after I'm dead?" Only then did the other 3 talisman masters of Heavenly Spirit sect react. One after another, they performed incantation gestures and drove the talisman treasures underneath their feet. There was a stream of dark energy, a red light, and a white light. The talisman treasures of these 3 talisman masters were indeed of water, fire, and metal element. No wonder they could cooperate with Ling Wujiu and junior brother Haoying in deploying the minor 5 stars spirit sealing formation. At this moment, they joined hands with Ling Wujiu and deployed another 4 elements grand formation. 4 types of energies merged into one, and a strong 4-colored light enveloped their bodies. Countless cracks appeared on the ground because of the powerful energy ripples. Shielding themselves with talisman treasures, Ling Wujiu and the other 3 talisman masters took out a large number of talismans at the same time. One thing that talisman masters of Heavenly Spirit sect did not lack was powerful talismans. With a casual shake of their hands, countless explosive talismans, lava talismans, lightning talismans, falling rock talismans, golden saber talismans, and many other talismans were thrust towards Wu Qi. The golden coin pointed at Wu Qi's finger kept shooting out large sheets of bright light, wheeling and slicing around the 4 talisman treasures at a high speed, constantly removing the energy gathered by the talisman treasures. Paying no attention to the middle and low-grade talismans that filled the sky, he forcibly used his fleshly body to resist the numerous talismans and leaped forward. Fireballs exploded on his body, lava rolled off his skin, thunderbolts exploded on his skin, huge rocks and countless golden sabers shattered on his skin, but none of them could stop him from moving forward. Not even a scratch was left on his body. Indestructible body, the Dharma body of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. After all, he was a human immortal who had attained the Mahayana realm of Jin Dan, and was only one step away from the realm of earth immortal. Ling Wujiu could easily recognize the mystery of Wu Qi's body. He roared furiously, "Which damned fool told me that he is just a little Taoist master of Xiantian realm? What a bastard! Are you trying to get us killed? Junior brothers, lend me a hand and activate the heavenly star positioning disc with all your strength. Or else, all of us will die here." A green jade disc, measuring 3 feet and 6 inches in circumference and 4 inches and 9 centimeters in thickness, slowly shot out from the top of Ling Wujiu's head. It corresponded to the number of stars in the sky, and coincided with the great divination. When the jade disc came out, the surrounding sky darkened instantly. Although it was broad daylight, a few stars actually emerged in the sky. Ling Wujiu gave a loud roar and pressed his palm on the jade disc. The other 3 talisman masters exchanged a glance, then stretched out their hands and pressed on Ling Wujiu's back at the same time. Their energies fused into one, and kept injecting into the jade disc. Wu Qi gave a long and sonorous cry. His eyes went wide as the silver lotus shot out abruptly, bringing with it countless 5-colored halos that thrust out like a wheel of blades. He opened his mouth, and the acquired fire spirit pearl that was floating in his dantian transformed into a ball of fire with a diameter of about 10 feet. Before the silver lotus flower could reach it, it landed heavily on the array formed by the 4 talisman treasures. Amidst a loud boom, Wu Qi himself was knocked several hundred feet away. Scorching hot flames shot in all directions, and the formation of 4 elements shattered with a loud boom. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.